Hi, welcome back guys. This is your Sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Naruto Unleashed Dark New Power? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Chapter 1. The Breaking Point. The battle had been intense. The Valley of the End bore witness to the devastation caused by two boys. Sasuke lay on the ground, unconscious and barely breathing, his cursed seal faded but leaving him in a fragile state. Naruto, though initially in worse condition, had been saved by the Nine Tails healing factor. Two faint scars marked his chest where Sasuke's Chidori had struck, a reminder of the fight that had nearly taken his life. Kakashi arrived on the scene, his heart heavy at the sight of his students. Sasuke's battered form raised concerns about the Uchiha's survival. Naruto, though stable, appeared pale and utterly exhausted. Without wasting a moment, Kakashi formed a shadow clone, instructing it to carry Naruto while he carefully lifted Sasuke. In a blur of speed, they vanished, rushing back to the village. Naruto awoke to the sterile scent of the hospital. His body ached as he slowly opened his eyes, blinking against the light streaming in from the window. As his vision adjusted, he saw a familiar figure sitting by his bed. Hinata's head shot up, tears welling in her eyes. In a moment of relief, she flung herself onto him in a desperate hug, trembling as she cried against his chest. Naruto coughed, wincing as the pressure on his still tender body sent a wave of discomfort through him. He managed to tell her that she was squishing him. Realizing this, Hinata pulled back abruptly, her face flushed with embarrassment. She apologized, wiping her tears as Naruto offered a weak smile, grateful for her concern. However, his smile faded as he remembered the fight. He asked about Sasuke and their friends, his heart sinking at Hinata's response. Neji and Choji were in critical condition, and Sasuke was also in a dire state, but the medics were doing everything they could. Guilt washed over Naruto as he stared at the ceiling. His friends had risked their lives to bring Sasuke back, and now they were paying the price. He insisted on seeing them, but Hinata urged him to rest, reminding him that he was still recovering. Reluctantly, he agreed to stay put for the time being. Throughout the day, Lee, Shikamaru, Gaara, Temari, Kiba, and Kankuro visited him, offering words of encouragement. Although he appreciated their support, the weight on his shoulders felt unbearable. That evening, two ANBU members appeared in his room. They addressed him directly, informing him that he had been summoned. Confused, Naruto asked by whom, but they remained silent. One of them placed a hand on his shoulder, and in an instant, they vanished from the hospital. When they reappeared, Naruto found himself in a cold, dimly lit council room. The three elders sat before him, their expressions grave. The Nine Tails stirred within him, sensing something was amiss. Danzo, the man with the bandages, leaned forward and informed Naruto that the council had made a decision. A knot formed in Naruto's stomach as he asked what that decision was. Koharu spoke next, her tone stern. She declared that Naruto was to be banished from Konoha. Shock coursed through him as he protested, demanding to know why. Koharu coldly explained that he was unstable and that his battle with Sasuke had nearly cost the Uchiha his life. The village could not afford to have someone so dangerous running loose. Naruto argued that he had no choice, that Sasuke had been trying to kill him. Hamura adjusted his glasses, stating that it was not just about this incident. Naruto could not control the Nine Tails' power and was therefore a liability. Tears streamed down Naruto's face as he expressed his anguish, feeling betrayed after everything he had done for the village. The elders dismissed his pleas, stating that the decision had been made and there was no point in arguing. Naruto glared at Danzo, insisting that Tsunade would never approve of this. Danzo smirked, revealing that she already had. Those words shattered Naruto's resolve, leaving him reeling in disbelief. The Nine Tails chuckled darkly in his mind, suggesting that they were lying and that he should let them play their game, as it worked in its favor. Danzo gestured to the ANBU, ordering them to escort Naruto home to gather his belongings, instructing him to leave the village immediately. Naruto did not resist as the ANBU seized him and vanished. Back at his apartment, the ANBU handed him a storage scroll. Wordlessly, Naruto began packing his essentials. As he worked, the Nine Tails whispered in his mind, its voice smooth and insidious, suggesting that the village had never cared about him and that he had always been alone. A knock at the door broke his thoughts. When he opened it, he was met with a furious Sakura. Before he could say anything, she slapped him hard across the face, blaming him for Sasuke's condition. Stunned, Naruto listened as she wished he were the one in a coma instead of him. Her words struck him deeply, leaving him heartbroken. She stormed off, leaving Naruto standing there, shattered. The Nine Tails grinned in his mind, encouraging him to embrace the pain. ANBU escorted Naruto outside the village. The journey was silent, but his mind was a whirlwind of despair and anger. Suddenly, they stopped, and the Nine Tails growled, warning him that something was amiss. Naruto ducked just in time to avoid a strike aimed at his neck, jumping back and glaring at the ANBU, demanding to know what was happening. The Nine Tails revealed that Danzo never intended to banish him. He wanted to control him, viewing him as nothing more than a tool. Something inside Naruto snapped. His sadness and confusion transformed into a seething rage, and a twisted grin spread across his face as he met the ANBU's gazes. He declared that they thought they could control him, his voice low and filled with venom. To be continued. Slowly, he raised his head, his cerulean eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural intensity. The lead ANBU tensed, ordering his team to take him down. The first ANBU lunged forward, his tanto slicing through the air with precision. Naruto sidestepped the attack, his movements faster than he realized, his instincts sharper. The blade barely grazed his cheek as he twisted around and slammed a knee into the man's gut, sending him flying back. The second ANBU shot through a flurry of hand signs, unleashing a wave of fire from his mouth. The flames roared toward Naruto, who leaped into the air, flipping over the attack. He landed behind the ANBU, his fist already swinging in a brutal arc that connected with the man's jaw, shattering his mask and sending him sprawling. The Nine Tails urged him on, encouraging him to let it out. Naruto's movements grew more feral, his body responding to instincts he didn't fully understand. He ducked under another slash, grabbed the wrist of the attacker, and twisted, causing the man to cry out in pain as he dropped his blade. Naruto caught it midair, feeling the tanto's weight in his hand, which felt oddly right. The remaining ANBU hesitated, regrouping and surrounding him. One muttered about him tapping into something, while their leader barked for them to stay focused, reminding them they outnumbered him. Naruto grinned, a sadistic smirk forming on his lips, as the air around him grew heavy and oppressive. Unbeknownst to him, a vast golden aura began to seep from his body. The Nine Tails questioned what was happening, sensing a power that wasn't its own. The ANBU moved as one, coordinating their attacks. One struck high from the front, while another attacked low from behind. Naruto spun, deflecting the high strike with a deafening clang. He kicked the lower attacker's blade away before driving the heel of his palm into the man's throat. Another ANBU used a lightning jutsu, sending a bolt crackling toward Naruto. Instinctively, he condensed the golden aura to form a barrier that absorbed the attack before shattering outward in a shockwave, sending the ANBU crashing into trees. Not giving them a chance to recover, Naruto lunged at the nearest one, his movements a blur. The tanto slashed across the man's chest, biting deep into armor and flesh. He shouted, filled with a mix of fury and exhilaration, challenging them to fight him with everything they had. The lead ANBU's hands trembled as he formed another set of seals, summoning a massive serpentine dragon made of water that surged toward Naruto. For a moment, it seemed the attack would overwhelm him, but Naruto raised his free hand, the air thickening with his energy. With a roar, he slashed the air with the tanto, the golden aura extending from the blade like an arc of pure energy. It collided with the water dragon, splitting it in half before tearing through the trees behind it. The ANBU froze in disbelief. Naruto's grin faltered, his body trembling as he fought to control the surge of power. The remaining ANBU charged again, their movements desperate. Naruto moved like a predator, his stolen blade flashing as he danced between them. One by one, they fell, their defeat evident in the chaos around him. The leader was the last one standing, breathing heavily as he watched his team fall. He called Naruto a monster, to which Naruto tilted his head, his grin gone, his eyes burning with a strange mix of anger and sorrow. As the last ANBU charged, aiming for Naruto's heart, he sidestepped, grabbed the man's wrist, and drove his own blade through him. As the leader collapsed, Naruto stood amidst the chaos, his body covered in remnants of the battle, breathing raggedly. The aura faded, leaving only silence. The Ninetales, usually confident, asked cautiously about the power he had tapped into. Naruto didn't answer, dropping the blade as his hands trembled. He looked at the bodies around him, his stomach churning with realization. What had he done? The knight offered no answers, only the weight of his actions. Naruto sat among the lifeless bodies of the Root and Bu, the weight of his actions pressing heavily on his mind. Blood dripped from the tanto in his hand, pooling onto the forest floor. As he stared blankly, the oppressive silence was broken by a soft, high-pitched voice. A tiny girl with bubblegum pink hair and a mischievous grin appeared before him. She leaned toward him, her small hand resting gently on his bloodied one, assuring him that everything would be fine. Naruto blinked in confusion, questioning who she was. The girl giggled, introducing herself as Yachiru and playfully reminding him not to be so serious after a fight. Her presence, though baffling, brought him an odd sense of comfort. Sitting cross-legged on the forest floor, the tanto lying beside him, Naruto's thoughts warred within him. He now understood that Tsunade hadn't truly betrayed him. Danzo had manipulated everything. Yet, even with that knowledge, he was uncertain of what to do. He muttered to himself about possibly going back, but the Ninetales growled in his mind, warning him that returning would only lead to more betrayal. Yachiru sat beside him, swinging her legs idly, encouraging him not to listen to the grumpy voice and to follow his instincts. Feeling something stir deep within him, Naruto clenched his fists. His instinct spoke not of retreat or espimation, but of something primal. He raised his head, a fierce grin spreading across his face, declaring that he wanted more fights, more challenges. Yachiru's eyes sparkled with delight, affirming that this was the Naruto she knew. Meanwhile, back in Konoha, Tsunade finished overseeing Niji's surgery and went to visit Naruto. When she didn't find him in the hospital, her worry grew. She ordered the staff and ANBU to search for him. Her concern turned to despair when a letter was found in his apartment, brief yet devastating, stating that he could no longer stay in the village and was leaving for good. The words hit her like a blow. She sank into her chair, clutching the letter tightly. The memory of Naruto proudly declaring his dream to become Hokage flashed through her mind, and her heart broke as she wondered why he had chosen this path. The situation worsened when her ANBU returned with a report of a tragic incident in the forest. The bodies of the Root ANBU had been discovered. Tsunade's fury boiled over as she summoned Danzo to her office, her fists clenched in barely restrained rage. She demanded to know what he had done to Naruto. Danzo stood calmly, feigning ignorance, insisting that Naruto's actions were his own. Tsunade's anger surged as she confronted him about the dead ANBU and Naruto's disappearance. Danzo's silence spoke volumes, and Tsunade signaled her ANBU to surround him, weapons drawn. Danzo smirked, warning her not to be hasty. Before Tsunade could react, Danzo activated a powerful genjutsu. The room fell silent as his subtle influence took hold. Tsunade's stern expression softened, and her ANBU lowered their weapons. Danzo chuckled darkly, thinking that one day, Naruto would be his. A week passed, and Sasuke, Niji, and Choji recovered from their injuries. However, Sasuke was consumed by fury. His hatred for Itachi burned brighter, and he seethed at Naruto for stopping him from achieving the power he believed he deserved. When Sakura visited him in the hospital, her face lit up with relief at seeing him awake. But Sasuke's glare made her falter as he coldly ordered her to leave. Her heart sank as she protested, but he repeated his demand. Tears welled in her eyes as she quietly left the room, her shoulders shaking. Meanwhile, Naruto's friends gathered, their expressions heavy with worry. Ino, Shino, Sakura, Shikamaru, Lee, Hinata, and Kiba sat together, concerned about Naruto's whereabouts. Kiba broke the silence, asking if anyone knew where he was. Shikamaru grimly noted that something was off, as Naruto would never just disappear. Ino frowned, questioning what could have caused him to leave. Sakura looked down, trembling as she whispered that it was her fault. The others turned to her in surprise, and Hinata, usually shy, demanded to know what she meant. Sakura clenched her fists, admitting she had said horrible things to Naruto, blaming him for Sasuke's condition and wishing he were the one in a coma instead. Hinata's eyes widened in shock, and she stood abruptly, storming over to Sakura. Without hesitation, she slapped her across the face. Sakura gasped, holding her cheek as tears filled her eyes. Ino exclaimed Hinata's name, but Hinata wasn't finished. She glared at Sakura, expressing her anger at how Sakura had treated Naruto, who had always been there for her even when she didn't deserve it. Sakura sobbed quietly, guilt consuming her as Hinata continued, reminding her that Naruto deserved better. The group fell silent, the weight of Hinata's words sinking in. Sakura admitted her wrongdoing, but Hinata insisted that it was Naruto she needed to apologize to. The group exchanged solemn looks, each vowing to find Naruto and make things right. The tension in Tsunade's office was suffocating when Jiraiya stormed in, his expression unusually dark. He slammed a fist on her desk, demanding to know what had happened to Naruto. Tsunade, still under Danzo's influence, tried to maintain her composure as she stated that Naruto had defected. Jiraiya's fists clenched in disbelief, insisting that Naruto would never abandon the village he dreamed of leading. Tsunade's voice hardened as she explained that Naruto had killed Root Anbu and left a letter stating he couldn't stay any longer. Jiraiya argued that Naruto had always come back stronger, and something was off about the situation. Tsunade remained firm, insisting that Naruto had left of his own free will. Jiraiya, frustrated, declared they needed to find Naruto before Danzo could reach him. Tsunade hesitated but ultimately told him to do what he must. Jiraiya left the office, his resolve strengthening with each step. At the cemetery, Kakashi knelt before the graves of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki, carrying the weight of his guilt. He placed a hand on Minato's gravestone, murmuring that he had failed Naruto and should have been there for him from the beginning. He shifted his gaze to Kushina's grave, lamenting that they had let her son down. Kakashi reflected on how Naruto had always believed in the village, even when they had not believed in him. Now he was gone, and Kakashi vowed to try to bring him back, feeling the burden of his failure. Meanwhile, Sasuke sat by the window in his hospital room, his dark eyes fixed on the horizon. He knew it was only a matter of time before he would take action. When the door creaked open, he recognized the presence immediately. Kabuto stepped inside with a sly smile, announcing that it was time. Sasuke smirked, ready to leave everything behind as he stood and cracked his neck. Kabuto gestured toward the window, urging him to follow quietly, as the Hokage's people were still watching. Sasuke climbed out of the window without hesitation, the cool night air brushing against his skin. As they disappeared into the darkness, Sasuke's smirk widened, knowing he was moving closer to his goal of avenging his family. The training ground was eerily quiet as the group of genin sat in a loose circle, each lost in their thoughts about Naruto and the challenges ahead. Ino, Shino, Shikamaru, Lee, Hinata, Kiba, and Sakura were gathered, but the usual camaraderie was absent. Sakura sat slightly apart from the others, her head bowed. No one spoke to her directly, but the weight of her earlier confession lingered in the air. Shikamaru finally broke the silence with a sigh, expressing that they wouldn't get anywhere sitting in silence. He emphasized that what was done, and they needed to focus on finding Naruto. Kiba growled lowly, questioning how they could be sure Naruto wanted to come back after being gone for weeks. Lee firmly asserted that Naruto was not someone who gave up and that if he left, there was a reason behind it. Hinata's gaze flickered to Sakura, her expression cold as she suggested that perhaps Naruto had grown tired of being hurt by those he cared about. Sakura flinched but remained silent. Ino crossed her arms, pointing out that not all of them had treated Naruto well, implying that Sakura had pushed him over the edge. Shino calmly interjected, stating that the blame game wasn't helping. Whether Naruto was coming back or not, they needed to figure out their next steps. Hinata stood abruptly, fists trembling, declaring her intent to find him and tell him the truth that he was not alone. With that, she stormed off, leaving the others in stunned silence. Meanwhile, Naruto sprinted through the dense forest, his senses heightened and his body primed for battle. Danzo's men were relentless, but each confrontation only made him stronger. His instincts sharpened with every fight, pushing him closer to a state of primal clarity. He thought to himself that they wouldn't stop, but neither would he. In a different location, Zetsu reported that Naruto was on the run and had taken down multiple squads of Root A and Bu. Pain's expression remained stoic, but his voice was firm as he commanded Itachi and Kisame to find Naruto, emphasizing that failure was not an option this time. Naruto stood in the middle of a clearing, surrounded by the remnants of battle. His clothes were tattered, and he looked down at the aftermath with a dissatisfied scowl. He muttered to himself, questioning the weakness of his opponents. However, his expression quickly shifted to a feral grin as he sensed two powerful presences approaching. From the shadows of the trees, Itachi and Kisame emerged, their expressions unreadable as they surveyed the scene. Kisame remarked on Naruto's presence, noting the girl beside him and questioning her significance. Itachi's sharp eyes lingered on her, sensing something unusual. Naruto's grin widened upon spotting them and he greeted them mockingly. Kisame chuckled, noting Naruto's boldness, while Itachi calmly stated that Naruto was coming with them. Naruto tilted his head, his grin widening further, warning them that it wouldn't be easy. Yachiru, a curious girl, expressed her excitement about Naruto's strength, encouraging him to show what he was made of. Kisame was momentarily taken aback by her enthusiasm, while Naruto rolled his eyes, clarifying that she was referring to him. Yachiru continued to cheer, insisting that Naruto was super strong and that they would need to try hard to defeat him. Itachi observed Yachiru closely, sensing her presence was not ordinary and that it could complicate matters. As the tension grew, Naruto cracked his knuckles, his bloodthirsty grin spreading. He challenged Itachi and Kisame to put up a better fight than his previous opponents, while Yachiru promised to cheer loudly for him. The air thickened with anticipation as they prepared for the inevitable clash. The forest fell silent, the atmosphere charged with the oppressive presence of Ryatsu and chakra as both sides faced each other. Yachiru, perched on a low branch, swung her legs happily, her bright smile contrasting sharply with the impending chaos. She cheered for Naruto, urging him to show his strength. His grin widened at her encouragement, and his Ryatsu flared, causing leaves to rustle and the ground to crack beneath him. Kisame acknowledged Naruto's guts, while Itachi analyzed his energy, noting its oppressive nature. Kisame questioned whether they were overstepping by confronting a child, but Itachi insisted they proceed with caution, activating his Sharingan. Yachiru admired Itachi's eyes, but confidently declared that Naruto was stronger. Naruto laughed, affirming her statement and urging his opponents not to hold back. With explosive speed, Naruto dashed forward, driven by raw instincts. Kisame was ready, swinging Samehada to meet him. However, Naruto ducked at the last moment, using his Ryatsu to disrupt Kisame's balance. His fist connected with Kisame's ribs, sending him skidding backward. Naruto continued his assault, launching himself at Itachi, who deftly sidestepped and blocked Naruto's wild strikes with minimal effort. Itachi caught Naruto's wrist and spun him toward Kisame, who grinned and swung Samehada again, but Naruto's Ryatsu flared, forming a barrier that deflected the blade. Kisame found the situation interesting, while Itachi swiftly formed hand signs and prepared a technique, causing Naruto to freeze mid-strike as the world around him darkened. Shadows enveloped him, and he felt phantom stakes pierce his limbs, immobilizing him. His body was unresponsive, and his vision blurred. Kisame leaned on Samehada, commenting that it seemed to wrap things up. But then, inside Naruto's mind, Kurama stirred. The Nine Tails growled, its massive form radiating disdain, urging Naruto to wake up and break free from the pathetic illusion. As Kurama's chakra surged, Naruto's vision shifted, breaking the genjutsu. His Ryatsu flared wildly, shattering the illusionary stakes and restoring his senses. With defiance, Naruto's Ryatsu intensified, creating cracks in the ground and sending shockwaves through the forest. Itachi narrowed his eyes, realizing that the Nine Tails was cooperating with Naruto. Naruto's movements became sharper, his instincts refining with each exchange. He began to predict Kisame's strikes and Itachi's evasions, adapting his Ryatsu to block and counter their attacks. Yachiru cheered from her perch, excitedly encouraging him to keep going. The thrill of battle overtook Naruto, and his Ryatsu surged, causing even Kisame and Itachi to feel its weight pressing down on them. Kisame, feeling exhilarated, noted that Naruto was something special and warned Itachi to be careful. Itachi remained calm but cautious, acknowledging the situation. Naruto grabbed a discarded blade from one of the fallen root umbu and charged at Kisame. The clash of steel echoed through the forest as Naruto's raw power met Kisame's refined kenjutsu. Samehada hummed, attempting to absorb Naruto's Ryatsu, but the energy was too volatile, causing the blade to recoil slightly. Itachi moved in to assist, but Naruto's instincts kicked in, forcing him to shift his focus. Their blades clashed, exchanging rapid strikes as Yachiru giggled, urging Naruto to beat them both. As the fight continued, Naruto felt a shift within himself. His Ryatsu grew more stable and controlled, allowing him to bolster his attacks and increase their force and speed. Itachi and Kisame both noticed the change, with Itachi observing that Naruto was learning and adapting. Kisame grinned, appreciating the challenge. The forest trembled under the weight of their battle, reshaping the terrain with the sheer power and skill of all three combatants. Yachiru clapped her hands excitedly, cheering for Naruto with unrelenting enthusiasm. Naruto's grin was fierce as he taunted his opponents, challenging them to stop holding back. Kisame wiped some blood from the corner of his mouth, sharing in the excitement of the battle. Itachi's eyes narrowed, recognizing that Naruto was unlike anyone they had faced before. Kisame prepared a powerful technique, forming hand seals at incredible speed and unleashing a massive torrent of water that flooded the area, turning the forest into a watery battlefield. Naruto landed on the water effortlessly, grinning as his Ryatsu flared, ready to take on the challenge. Kisame smirked, calling Naruto a cocky brat as he surged toward him on the wave. Naruto didn't flinch. Instead, he created a burst of pressure with his Ryatsu that split the wave in half, sending water crashing in all directions. Kisame launched himself at Naruto, but Naruto twisted midair, narrowly avoiding the strike and countering with a powerful kick that sent Kisame flying. While Kisame engaged Naruto, Itachi moved silently, his Sharingan observing every movement. As Naruto darted toward Kisame, Itachi prepared a fire technique, unleashing a massive sphere of flames. Naruto's instincts kicked in, and he created a shield with his Ryatsu that absorbed the brunt of the attack, though the force pushed him back, leaving him vulnerable. Itachi appeared behind him, kunai in hand, but Naruto twisted just in time, the kunai grazing his side. He retaliated with a wild swing of his stolen blade, forcing Itachi to leap back. Yachiru encouraged Naruto to hit harder, reminding him that he was cooler than his opponents. With renewed determination, Naruto's Ryatsu surged again. Kisame, ready to get serious, merged with Samehada, transforming into a more shark-like form as his chakra spiked. He darted forward, attacking Naruto from all angles with incredible speed. Each strike was faster and more powerful, forcing Naruto to rely on his instincts and Ryatsu to defend himself. Kisame then unleashed a water technique, encasing both himself and Naruto in a massive sphere of water. The swirling currents pressed against Naruto from all sides, threatening to overwhelm him. Outside the dome, Yachiru tilted her head, finding the situation amusing. Itachi remained composed, his Sharingan analyzing Naruto's struggle against the water, ready to see how the battle would unfold. This would test whether the boy could adapt under true pressure. Inside the water prison, Kisame's shark-like grin widened as he declared that this was his domain and challenged Naruto to see how long he could last without air. He shot through the water like a torpedo, colliding with Naruto and sending him spiraling from the impact. Naruto felt the burn in his lungs from the lack of oxygen, but his Ryatsu flared, pushing back the water momentarily before being overwhelmed by the relentless currents. Kisame's laughter echoed through the water, taunting Naruto to struggle all he wanted, as it wouldn't save him. Naruto's vision blurred, but he refused to give up. He resolved to fight back, declaring that he wouldn't surrender, not here and not to him. His Ryatsu surged, forming a protective aura around him, though even that was being drained by the water's crushing pressure. Kisame launched another attack, aiming for Naruto's throat with his claws. Naruto twisted his body, narrowly avoiding the strike, pushing himself to his physical limits as he battled to maintain consciousness. He clenched his teeth, determined to end this. Naruto's Ryatsu began to concentrate, the yellow energy condensing around him. Kisame noticed the change, his grin faltering for the first time. With a fierce roar, Naruto unleashed his Ryatsu in a massive burst, shattering the water prison and sending a shockwave through the battlefield. Water erupted in all directions, drenching the area and leaving Naruto standing tall, his Ryatsu blazing like a second sun. Kisame was thrown backward, landing heavily on the soaked ground, momentarily stunned by the force of Naruto's attack. Outside the now-collapsed dome, Yachiru clapped enthusiastically, celebrating the impressive display. Itachi observed the aftermath with narrowed eyes, his Sharingan analyzing the situation and noting that Naruto was stronger than he had anticipated. Kisame growled, forcing himself to his feet, acknowledging Naruto's toughness but insisting he wasn't done yet. Naruto smirked, his Ryatsu still surging, eager for the fight to continue. The two clashed again, but this time, Naruto had the upper hand. His movements were sharper, and his strikes more powerful, forcing Kisame onto the defensive. With a final, earth-shaking strike, Naruto sent Kisame crashing into the ground, creating a massive crater. Kisame lay motionless, his body reverting to its normal form, and Samahata fell from his grasp. Standing over him, Naruto breathed heavily but felt victorious. He remarked that it had been fun, but next time, he hoped Kisame wouldn't hold back so much. Yachiru celebrated, exclaiming that she knew Naruto would win. Naruto chuckled, asking if she had ever doubted him. Itachi stepped forward, his expression unreadable, stating that Naruto was more dangerous than he had expected. Naruto's grin widened, confident that he had more to show. The forest lay in ruins, water flooding the battlefield from Kisame's earlier attacks. The Akatsuki swordsman was down, his unconscious form floating on the water. Yachiru sat perched on her tree branch, swinging her legs cheerfully, seemingly unaffected by the devastation around her. Naruto stood amidst the chaos, his body tense and clothes tattered, but his grin remained. His golden Ryatsu flickered around him like a storm, battered but still eager to fight. Itachi regarded him carefully, his Sharingan spinning as he assessed Naruto's condition. He acknowledged Naruto's strength but pointed out his lack of DSPLN and precision. Naruto wiped blood from his lip, his feral grin unwavering, ready to prove himself. Without a word, Itachi raised his hand, forming a series of rapid hand seals. With a powerful technique, Itachi unleashed a barrage of small fireballs, each zigzagging unpredictably toward Naruto. Naruto darted to the side, leaping across the water's surface, his speed barely enough to avoid the scorching flames. He challenged Itachi to do better, and Itachi complied with a massive gust of wind that roared toward Naruto, picking up water and debris to create a devastating whirlwind. Naruto crossed his arms, forming a protective barrier around him as the wind cut into his shield, forcing him to brace himself. Before he could recover, Itachi struck again, summoning a colossal water dragon that crashed toward Naruto. He leapt high into the air, but the dragon followed, twisting upward to strike. Naruto's Ryatsu flared, and with a swing of his stolen tanto, he sliced through the water dragon, dispersing it into harmless droplets. He landed back on the water, panting but determined, admitting that Itachi was not bad but that he was just getting warmed up. Itachi's voice was calm, almost emotionless, as he noted that Naruto relied too much on brute force and challenged him to handle what was next. His Mangekyo Sharingan spun, pulling Naruto into a separate reality. Suddenly, Naruto found himself bound to a wooden cross in a dark, endless void, with a blood-red moon overhead. Multiple versions of Itachi appeared around him, each holding a blade, declaring that this was the world of Tsukuyami, where he controlled time and space. Naruto struggled against his restraints, but it was futile. The first strike came swiftly, and time seemed to drag as he was repeatedly attacked, each wound feeling agonizingly real. Despite the pain, Naruto refused to scream, his defiance burning even in this fabricated reality. After what felt like an eternity, the illusion shattered. Naruto collapsed to one knee in the real world, breathing raggedly, sweat dripping down his face. His body trembled from the lingering pain, but his eyes still burned with determination. Itachi's gaze narrowed, incredulous that Naruto had survived. Naruto grinned weakly, challenging Itachi to try harder to break him. Yachiru clapped excitedly from her perch, praising Naruto for overcoming the strange eye trick. Itachi stepped back, his Mangekyo flaring once more as a skeletal figure began to form around him. In moments, the fully formed Susanoo stood tall, radiating a sense of invincibility. In one hand, it held the Yata mirror, said to reflect and nullify any attack, while in the other, it conjured the Yasaka Magatama, spinning beads of chakra capable of devastating destruction. Itachi calmly declared that it was time to see how Naruto would fare against this. Naruto's grin returned, eager for the challenge. The Susanoo launched the Yasaka Magatama, the spinning projectiles tearing through the air. Naruto barely managed to evade, the explosions sending shockwaves that rocked the battlefield. Charging forward, he swung his blade at the Susanoo's chest, but the Yata mirror intercepted the strike, reflecting the force back at him and sending Naruto flying into the water with a loud splash. This is the end. The voice within. As Naruto struggled to stand, a faint whisper reached his ears, urging him to call out. He froze, gripping the tanto tightly, questioning the presence. The voice, soft yet commanding, promised strength if he would only say its name. Confusion clouded Naruto's brow as he sought to understand what was being asked of him. The voice grew more insistent, urging him to say the name Noza. Though the name eluded him, he felt a pull toward it, a sense of purpose igniting within him. Naruto stood, blood trickling from his forehead, and raised the tanto, a fierce grin spreading across his face. He was ready to embrace the challenge ahead. He slashed his palm, allowing his blood to coat the blade, and as he roared the name Nozarashi, the weapon transformed into an enormous battle axe, jagged and powerful. Its very presence shook the air around them. Itachi's eyes widened slightly as he recognized the blade. Naruto swung Nozarashi with such force that a shockwave erupted, splitting the water and cracking the ground beneath them. The Susanoo raised the Yata mirror, but Nozarashi cleaved through it effortlessly, shattering the legendary shield. The axe continued its path, cutting deep into the Susanoo's chest, causing the construct to waver and crack. Itachi's calm demeanor faltered as he witnessed the power before him. Naruto leapt forward, his energy flaring brighter than ever, declaring that he would not be stopped. With a final, thunderous strike, Nozarashi cleaved through the Susanoo entirely, the massive construct disintegrating into shards of energy. Itachi was sent flying, landing hard on the ground, blood escaping from his mouth. The battlefield fell silent, and Yachiru cheered, her voice echoing through the wreckage, celebrating Naruto's victory. He stood tall, Nozarashi resting on his shoulder, his grin wild and his energy still blazing like a storm. Itachi, weak and battered, acknowledged Naruto's newfound danger. Naruto smirked, confident in his abilities and ready for what lay ahead. Yachiru leapt down from her perch, landing beside him, her excitement palpable. The fight was over, but Naruto sensed it was just the beginning. With Nozarashi in hand, his journey had taken an unexpected turn, and the world would never be the same. Chapter 8. Naruto stood tall, his breath heavy but steady, gazing at the fallen form of Itachi. A proud smile played on his lips as Yachiru giggled, perched on his shoulder, celebrating their victory. To his surprise, Itachi slowly rose to his feet, swaying slightly from the effort, his cloak torn and stained. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the world around them faded as Itachi's Sharingan spun. Naruto felt the familiar sensation of Tsukuyami gripping him, but he resisted, his grin fading as he confronted Itachi's unwavering gaze. Itachi, however, only wished to talk. Naruto's suspicion flared as Itachi inquired about his departure from the village. Reluctantly, Naruto shared his frustrations about the lies and treatment he had endured, expressing his feelings of being a scapegoat. Itachi's gaze softened, revealing a flicker of regret as he acknowledged Naruto's pain and offered to train him. Naruto blinked in surprise, his bravado faltering at the unexpected offer. Itachi explained that he saw immense potential in Naruto, but he needed guidance to refine his raw fighting style. Naruto considered the proposal cautiously, agreeing to think about it. As Itachi released the genjutsu, he approached Naruto and produced a crow from his sleeve, which flew into Naruto's mouth. Staggering and choking, Naruto glared at Itachi, who calmly referred to it as a gift, cryptically suggesting that one day Naruto would understand. Itachi then staggered toward Kisame, his body protesting as he gripped Samehada, which drained his remaining chakra. Ignoring the pain, he placed the sword into Kisame's hand, allowing it to heal his injuries. As Kisame stirred, he questioned what had happened, and Itachi weakly stated it was time to leave before collapsing against a tree. Kisame, regaining his strength, noticed Naruto holding no Zaraki and expressed admiration for the blade. Naruto smirked, promising that he would cut Kisame down with it next time. Kisame chuckled, looking forward to their next encounter, before lifting the unconscious Itachi onto his shoulder and muttering about Pain's potential fury over their failure. As they vanished, no Zaraki cracked and shattered, reverting to its makeshift Tanto form. Naruto glanced at the broken weapon, realizing it was not strong enough to hold the power he had wielded. Yachiru giggled, pointing out the inadequacy of the Tanto, prompting Naruto to sigh and acknowledge that he would need a real sword. Meanwhile, the Akatsuki gathered in their holographic forms, with Pain commanding attention at the center. He coldly inquired about the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, and Kisame admitted their failure. Pain's eyes narrowed dangerously as he demanded an explanation. Itachi calmly explained that Naruto had grown stronger since their last encounter, while Kisame added that Naruto was like a demon, always rising stronger after being knocked down. Konan expressed skepticism about Itachi's failure to neutralize Naruto with his Sharingan, to which Itachi admitted his genjutsu had been ineffective. Deidara, intrigued, suggested he might take a crack at Naruto next time, while Zetsu warned that if Naruto's power continued to grow unchecked, it could jeopardize their plans. The tension in the room was palpable as they contemplated the implications of Naruto's evolution. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as Sasori contemplated the potential of a boy who thrived under pressure. He envisioned a puppet imbued with such power, capable of evolving in the heat of battle, a true masterpiece worthy of eternal perfection. He was determined that the boy would belong to him, one way or another. Haydn scoffed at the others, expressing his eagerness to demonstrate Jashin's wrath if they would just bring the boy to him. Kakuzu grunted in response, suggesting that Haydn might not survive long enough to do so. Pain raised a hand to silence the bickering, asserting that if the Nine-Tails was as formidable as they claimed, he would take on the challenge personally. On the roof of the academy, Irika gazed at the horizon as the sun set, casting the village in warm hues. However, the beauty of the scene did little to ease the turmoil in his heart. Memories of Naruto, his antics, determination, and laughter played in his mind, each one a reminder of the boy's absence. Irika's grip on the rooftop tightened as he wondered where Naruto was, feeling a tightening in his chest. He had often scolded Naruto for his recklessness, for skipping class and causing chaos with his pranks. Yet, deep down, Irika recognized Naruto's uniqueness, a bright light overshadowed by the villagers' disdain. The wind picked up, carrying the distant sounds of children laughing, a reminder of joy that now only deepened his sorrow. He recalled the empty seat in the classroom and the small ramen bowls they used to share. He wished he had done more to make Naruto feel like he belonged. Irika whispered a heartfelt plea for Naruto's safety, hoping that somehow, the boy could hear him. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, he remained on the roof, silently wishing for Naruto's return. Inside the Ichiraku ramen shop, the familiar aroma of broth and noodles filled the air, but the atmosphere was heavy with sadness. Ayam wiped the counter, glancing at the empty stool that had once been Naruto's favorite spot. She asked her father if he thought Naruto was eating well, to which Tsuchi responded that Naruto could survive on willpower alone, but he knew the boy missed them just as much. Ayam recalled how Naruto would order extra servings, claiming ramen was his fuel. They shared a bittersweet laugh as they reminisced about his loud slurping that startled other customers. The shop fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the simmering broth. Ayam longed for Naruto to burst through the door, calling for his usual order, but the entrance remained still. She expressed her feelings of missing him, noting how the shop felt quieter without him. Tsuchi agreed, affirming Naruto's strength and promising that when he returned, they would have a bowl ready for him. Ayam smiled faintly, suggesting they prepare extra servings just in case. They both sat in quiet reflection, the warm glow of the shop a small beacon of hope as they awaited their favorite customer's return. Above, the sky was painted in deep blues and purples as the sun set. A gentle breeze rustled the trees, carrying the scent of wildflowers. Naruto sat on a large boulder in a quiet clearing, lost in thought. Beside him, Yachiru dangled her legs off the edge, humming a carefree tune. She noticed his serious demeanor and asked if he was thinking about a fight. Naruto chuckled softly, though it lacked humor. His thoughts drifted back to Konoha and the people he had left behind. Despite the bitterness from years of being shunned, certain faces lingered in his mind, making his decision to leave sting even more. He remembered Irika's warm smile and the way he had always stood up for him, making him feel valued. He thought of Tsuchi and Ayam, who had treated him like any other customer, offering him a sense of normalcy. He missed their ramen and the welcoming atmosphere they provided. Then there was Hinata, whose belief in him had been a source of comfort. He questioned whether he had hurt her by leaving. Clenching his fists, he felt the weight of the memories pressing down on him. They were a double-edged sword, cutting through the resolve that had driven him to abandon the village. He had left to escape the glares and whispers, but in doing so, he had turned his back on those who had shown him kindness. Yachiru's voice broke through his thoughts, pulling him back to the present. She stood close, peering at him with a playful pout, reminding him to shake off the brooding expression. Fighting was more enjoyable when one was smiling. He blinked, then smirked despite himself. He reached out to ruffle her hair, deciding to save the brooding for later. Yachiru giggled and hopped down from the rock, bouncing around with an endless supply of energy. She mentioned a strong guy in the next town, expressing her excitement about the prospect of a fun fight. Naruto's smirk widened into something feral, his thirst for battle reigniting. He stood up, cracking his knuckles, and declared that they should go, as he had been itching for a real fight. As they walked toward the horizon, Naruto cast one last glance at the clearing, the faint memories of Konoha flickering in his mind. He resolved to keep moving forward, no matter what. This was his path now. Kurama fumed within his cage, his crimson eyes blazing. Naruto's resilience was infuriating. He was supposed to despair, not revel in the chaos of battle. As Naruto rested with Yachiru, Kurama pulled him into his mindscape. The beast growled, summoning Naruto into his realm. Naruto appeared, arms crossed, and asked what was needed now. Kurama's voice was cold as he revealed that Naruto deserved to know the truth about his parents, the third Hokage, and his senseis, and their betrayal. Naruto's smirk vanished as Kurama's words cut deep. He learned that his father, the fourth Hokage, had sealed the nine tails inside him, condemning Naruto to a life of suffering. The failure of Hiruzen to protect him and the absence of Kakashi and Jiraiya, despite their closeness to his parents, weighed heavily on him. His fists clenched, knuckles turning white as he realized they all knew and left him to suffer. Kurama's lips curled into a cruel grin, urging him to drown in despair. But Yachiru hugged Naruto tightly, her presence pulling him from the depths of his anger. She reassured him that everything would be fine. Kurama's eyes widened as he heard her voice echo in his mind. Yachiru warned Kurama to stop trying to manipulate Naruto, threatening to destroy him if he didn't. The nine tails froze, fear creeping into his ancient heart, wondering just who this girl was. Jiraiya found Naruto near a riverbank. Yachiru perched cheerfully on a rock beside him. He smiled warmly, glad that Naruto was safe, and asked about his little friend. Yuichiro waved and introduced herself as Kenny's best friend. However, Jiraiya's smile faltered under Naruto's cold stare. When Jiraiya stated he wanted to bring Naruto back to the village, Naruto's predatory grin returned as he declared that if he returned, it would be to burn it to the ground. Jiraiya's heart sank, realizing Tsunade was right. Naruto was broken. Naruto's Ryatsu flared as he gripped his tanto tightly, demanding to see the strength of a Sannin before lunging forward. Jiraiya dodged Naruto's initial strike, the blade carving a crater into the ground. Naruto followed with a kick, and Jiraiya blocked, wincing at the force. He shouted an earth-style technique, trapping Naruto in sinking mud. Jiraiya pleaded for Naruto to stop, insisting they could work things out. But Naruto's feral grin faded, replaced by a pained expression as he questioned where Jiraiya had been when he needed him. It had taken 13 years for Jiraiya to show up. Jiraiya froze, guilt washing over him as he explained that he had responsibilities as a Sannin and couldn't be there. Naruto yelled that Jiraiya could have visited, even just once in a while. Jiraiya bowed his head, apologizing, but Naruto growled that it was too late. Golden Ryatsu surged around him, taking the shape of a cackling skull, and the swamp evaporated under the pressure. Thus, the battle began. The riverbank was serene, the gentle flow of water whispering across the stones, but the tension in the air between two powerful figures was palpable. Jiraiya stood firm, regret etched on his weathered face as he regarded Naruto, who stood opposite him, arms crossed and eyes narrowed with disdain. Jiraiya implored Naruto to come home, stating that the village needed him. Naruto's laugh cut him off, bitter and harsh, as he scoffed at the idea of home in the village that had treated him poorly for 13 years. Jiraiya stepped forward, hands slightly raised, acknowledging his failures and expressing his desire to have been there sooner. But Naruto interrupted, accusing Jiraiya of playing the hero for his own conscience rather than for him. Jiraiya admitted to making mistakes but insisted it was not too late to fix them. Naruto's Ryatsu surged, creating a heavy pressure in the air as he declared that it was too late for him and then lunged. Naruto moved with blinding speed, his fist hurtling toward Jiraiya. The older ninja barely managed to sidestep, the force of the punch creating a small crater where he had stood. Jiraiya leaped back, forming hand signs as he unleashed a technique that turned the ground beneath Naruto into a sticky mire. But Naruto didn't hesitate, his Ryatsu surged, cracking the earth as he leaped out of the swamp's reach and launched himself at Jiraiya again. Jiraiya realized that Naruto was moving with pure speed, blocking his punch with his forearm. The impact sent a shockwave through the air, and Jiraiya slid back, digging trenches in the dirt. Naruto followed up with a kick aimed at Jiraiya's ribs, but the older ninja ducked and countered with a palm strike to Naruto's chest, sending him skidding back. Jiraiya acknowledged Naruto's strength with a hint of pride, but Naruto smirked, claiming he was stronger than Jiraiya could handle. Jiraiya didn't waste time. He clapped his hands together and unleashed a torrent of oil from his mouth. Naruto dodged with almost unnatural speed, but the oil spread across the ground, making it slick. Jiraiya ignited the oil with a fire release technique, flames roaring and engulfing the area. Yet, Naruto emerged unscathed, his Ryatsu acting as an invisible barrier. He shot forward again, aiming for Jiraiya's abdomen, but Jiraiya countered with a technique that extended his hair into hardened spikes, ready to lash out. Naruto dodged most of the attacks, though a few grazed his arms, leaving thin lines of blood. He didn't slow down. He ducked under the spikes and delivered a powerful uppercut to Jiraiya's jaw, sending the Sannin stumbling back. Jiraiya wiped his mouth, grinning despite himself. He acknowledged Naruto's growth, but warned him that raw strength alone wouldn't be enough to defeat him. Naruto, feeling the surge of his energy, challenged Jiraiya to show him what he could do. Jiraiya responded by weaving hand signs and unleashing a concentrated stream of flames toward Naruto. Instead of dodging, Naruto extended his hand, bending the flames away with his energy. With a taunt, Naruto charged forward again. This time, Jiraiya was ready. He slammed his hands into the ground, causing a massive wall of earth to erupt between them, forcing Naruto to halt. Grinning, Naruto raised his hand, forming a swirling ball of energy. He unleashed his Rasengan, which tore through the earth wall effortlessly, forcing Jiraiya to leap out of the way just in time. He landed hard, panting. The battle raged on, transforming the once peaceful riverbank into a chaotic scene of fire, earth, and raw power. The tension grew with each exchange, neither fighter willing to give an inch. On a nearby rock, Yachier cheered loudly, encouraging Naruto while her eyes sparkled with excitement for the clash to come. As the smoke and dust began to settle, Jiraiya's hands moved into a familiar formation, his resolve hardening. He declared that he would show Naruto the true power of a Sannin. Naruto's smirk widened as his energy swirled violently around him, ready for the challenge. The air was thick with tension, the serene riverbank now scarred by their earlier exchanges. Naruto stood tall, his energy burning around him like an untamed flame, while Jiraiya's expression was focused and determined. Jiraiya acknowledged Naruto's stubbornness and pulled out a scroll, stating that he would no longer hold back. Naruto smirked, drawing his tanto from its sheath, wielding it with a relaxed grip that hinted at his skill. Jiraiya slammed his palm against the scroll, summoning Gamabunta with a deafening boom. The massive toad appeared, casting a shadow over the battlefield. Gamabunta grumbled about being dragged into pointless fights, but Jiraiya insisted that this was necessary to bring Naruto to his senses. Gamabunta, reluctant, accepted the situation, while Naruto greeted him with a smirk, teasing about his pipe. Gamabunta swung his blade, creating a shockwave that rippled through the air. Naruto moved with blinding speed, dodging the strike and landing on the blade itself. He dashed up its length toward Gamabunta, his tanto gleaming in his hand. Jiraiya shouted a warning, forming hand signs for a powerful gust of wind that blasted toward Naruto, forcing him to leap back to avoid being swept away. Naruto landed lightly on his feet, raising his tanto defensively and acknowledging Jiraiya's skill. Jiraiya smirked and unleashed a binding technique, golden chains erupting from the ground beneath Naruto. Reacting instantly, Naruto released a powerful pulse of energy that shattered the chains before they could ensnare him. He acknowledged Jiraiya's determination, noting that this was just the beginning. Jiraiya's hair began to extend and harden, forming into razor-sharp spikes that shot toward Naruto. He weaved and dodged with incredible agility, but a few spikes grazed him, drawing thin lines of blood. Undeterred, Naruto closed the distance between them with a burst of speed. Jiraiya transitioned seamlessly, his hair wrapping around Naruto like tendrils, attempting to immobilize him. However, Naruto's energy flared violently, shredding through the hair with raw force as he surged forward, his tanto slashing at Jiraiya with speed and power that forced the older ninja to leap back. Gamabunta leaped into the air, his massive blade descending toward Naruto like a guillotine. Naruto didn't flinch. He raised his tanto, imbuing it with his energy, and met the attack head-on. The clash of blades sent a shockwave through the area, cracking the ground beneath Naruto from the sheer force. Despite the size difference, Naruto held his ground, his energy glowing brighter as he pushed Gamabunta back. Jiraiya, still on Gamabunta's shoulder, formed a Rasengan in his hand and leaped toward Naruto. Sensing the impending clash, Naruto sidestepped Gamabunta's next strike and turned to meet Jiraiya head-on. Their collision was explosive, the Rasengan colliding with Naruto's energy-infused tanto, resulting in a shockwave that sent both of them skidding back. Naruto didn't give Jiraiya a moment to recover. He dashed forward, his tanto a blur as he unleashed a flurry of strikes. Jiraiya blocked as best he could, but Naruto's speed was overwhelming. Acknowledging Naruto's skill, Jiraiya slammed his hand into the ground, summoning a massive wall of earth that erupted between them, forcing Naruto to halt his advance. With a smirk, Naruto raised his hand, preparing another Rasengan infused with his energy. He wasn't the only one capable of using that technique. With a powerful slam, he drove it into the wall, and the Rasengan tore through effortlessly. Naruto burst through the debris, his tanto aimed directly at Jiraiya's chest. Jiraiya barely managed to block with a kunai, the force of the strike sending him flying backward. He landed hard, panting heavily. Gamabunta stepped back, his massive blade resting on the ground as he observed the scene. He acknowledged the situation, recognizing the seriousness of the fight. Jiraiya wiped the sweat from his brow, aware of the stakes. Naruto stood a few feet away, his energy still burning brightly, showing no signs of fatigue. He coldly remarked on Jiraiya's slowing pace, questioning if that was all he had. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes, determined to prove otherwise. He began forming a series of hand signs, ready to unleash his full potential. Naruto urged him to stop talking and show his true strength, charging forward once more. The riverbank bore the scars of their fierce battle, its tranquility shattered by the clash of power. Jiraiya stood on the ground, breathing heavily as he dismissed Gamabunta with a single hand sign. The boss toad vanished in a puff of smoke, leaving only the two opponents and the faint rush of the river nearby. It was time to get serious. Jiraiya bit his thumb and slammed it into the ground, summoning his allies. In an instant, Ma and Pa appeared on his shoulders, their expressions serious as they surveyed the battlefield. Ma expressed concern over Jiraiya's predicament, while Pa questioned the identity of the child before them. Jiraiya revealed that the child was Naruto and that he needed their help to stop him. Ma and Pa nodded in agreement, ready to assist. As Jiraiya entered Sage mode, his appearance transformed, becoming more toad-like, with markings deepening on his face. His chakra flared, radiating overwhelming strength. Yachiru climbed down from her perch, her smile unwavering as she observed the scene. Naruto, with a faint grin, acknowledged that he would not hold back either. He drew his tanto and held it aloft, slicing his palm to coat the weapon in blood. The tanto transformed into a massive weapon, a hybrid of a giant axe and a war cleaver, radiating an aura of destruction. The weight of his energy intensified, pressing down on the battlefield like a hurricane. Jiraiya's eyes widened, and even Ma and Pa were taken aback by the transformation. Jiraiya, focused, realized something peculiar about Yachiru. Despite no chakra emanating from her, her energy felt identical to the weapon Naruto now wielded. The realization struck him. She was not human but rather connected to Naruto's sword, Nozarashi. Naruto hefted Nozarashi onto his shoulder with ease, smirking as he prepared for battle. He wasted no time, swinging the massive blade in a wide arc. The sheer force sent a shockwave through the air, splitting the river and carving a deep gouge into the earth. Jiraiya leaped into the air to avoid the attack, his sage-enhanced agility making him a blur. He unleashed a technique, sending a crescent-shaped blade of wind hurtling toward Naruto. Naruto responded by swinging Nozarashi upward, cleaving through the wind effortlessly. He charged forward, bringing the cleaver down in a powerful slash aimed at Jiraiya. Jiraiya sidestepped at the last moment, but the attack left a massive crater in the ground. Jiraiya countered with a flurry of strikes, his punches and kicks capable of shattering boulders. He moved with incredible speed, his sensory abilities in Sage mode allowing him to predict Naruto's movements. He launched a massive ball of fire at Naruto, but Naruto swung Nozarashi, cutting through the flames as if they were nothing. He charged forward, bringing the cleaver down in a diagonal slash. Jiraiya blocked with both hands, but the force sent him skidding back, cracking the ground beneath him. Undeterred, Jiraiya formed a series of hand signs and slammed his hands into the ground, attempting to trap Naruto in a viscous swamp. Reacting instantly, Naruto leaped into the air and brought Nozarashi down in a devastating overhead slash, causing the swamp to explode outward and obliterate the terrain. Naruto acknowledged Jiraiya's efforts, gripping Nozarashi tightly as he prepared for another assault. He dashed forward, swinging the massive blade in a horizontal arc. Jiraiya ducked, narrowly avoiding the strike, which sliced clean through a row of trees behind him. Jiraiya called for Ma and Pa to assist him. They unleashed a torrent of oil, fire, and wind, creating a blazing inferno that surged toward Naruto. The attack consumed everything in its path, the heat so intense that the river began to evaporate. Naruto swung Nozarashi with both hands, channeling his energy into the blade. The resulting shockwave clashed with the inferno, creating a massive explosion that rocked the battlefield. When the smoke cleared, Naruto stood unscathed, his energy still raging. Nozarashi's edge glowed faintly, as if eager for more destruction. Jiraiya leaped into the air, forming a massive Rasengan in his hand. His Sage-enhanced speed and strength made him a blur as he descended toward Naruto. Naruto raised Nozarashi to meet the attack head-on. The collision created a blinding explosion of energy that sent shockwaves across the battlefield, flinging both combatants backward. They landed on their feet, ready for the next phase of their battle. As the toads began chanting, Naruto's eyes narrowed. Jiraiya kept him occupied until the toads completed their incantation. The air shifted around Naruto, and he found himself trapped in a tube of water. 4 towering toad samurai emerged outside the tube, their massive forms armored and imposing, each wielding colossal stone blades. They surrounded Naruto, forming an impenetrable barrier. Jiraiya's voice echoed across the void, urging Naruto to stop fighting and let him help. Naruto grinned, ready to face whatever came next. "Help me? Now you want to help me?" He clenched his fists, his spiritual energy flaring in defiance. He questioned where that help had been when he was alone, when everyone had turned against him. The arrival after 13 years felt too late to him. Jiraiya flinched, regret evident in his expression. He acknowledged his failure. He was trying to make amends. "Too late for that, old man," Naruto replied sharply. The toad samurai advanced, their stone swords raised. One of them struck, the blade grazing Naruto's shoulder. Another followed, the sword aimed for his thigh. The impact forced Naruto to one knee, water beneath him tinged with red, yet his spirit remained unbroken. "Give it up, kid," Matoad urged, her voice strained. "You're strong, but this illusion is unbreakable. Stay down, and let us end this without more suffering." Naruto chuckled darkly, his smirk unwavering despite his wounds. "Unbreakable, huh? Guess I'll have to prove you wrong." The toad samurai closed in, their stone blades raised to deliver more non-lethal yet impactful strikes. Jiraiya's voice rang out, desperation in his tone. He didn't want to hurt Naruto any more than he already had. But Naruto pressed on. His spiritual energy surged violently, shaking the very fabric of the illusion. The water beneath him rippled, and the towering forms of the toad samurai faltered for a moment. "You think some old trick can hold me?" Naruto roared, his voice echoing. His energy spiked to unprecedented levels, causing cracks to form in the illusory ocean. "I've fought too hard to be stopped now." The toad samurai staggered, their movements slowing as the barrier began to crumble under the weight of Naruto's energy. Ma and Pa Toad gasped, their chanting faltering as the oppressive force threatened to overwhelm even them. "This. Pa Toad muttered, trembling. "It's monstrous." Jiraiya's eyes widened as he felt his body grow heavy, his limbs paralyzed by the sheer force of Naruto's spiritual pressure. Naruto's energy continued to climb, tearing through the illusion like a storm. The toad samurai vanished, their forms dissolving into mist as the illusion shattered completely. Back in the real world, Jiraiya stumbled, his knees nearly buckling under the weight of Naruto's spiritual energy. Even Ma and Pa Toad seemed shaken, their usual composure replaced by unease. Naruto stood amidst the devastation, his breaths ragged but his resolve unbroken. His eyes burned with fury and sadness, tears streaming down his face. "This was fun," Naruto said quietly, filled with emotion. He raised Nozarashi, the massive cleaver axe glinting ominously in the fading light. "But I'm done playing." Jiraiya stared at the boy he had failed to protect, tears welling in his own eyes. He wished it didn't have to come to this. Naruto's grip tightened on Nozarashi's handle as he lifted it over his head, preparing for a powerful strike. The sheer weight of his energy caused the ground beneath him to crack, and the air grew thick with tension. "Then why?" Naruto whispered, his voice breaking. "Didn't you come sooner?" Jiraiya had no answer. He couldn't respond. The scene froze in that moment, both warriors filled with emotion as Naruto prepared to bring Nozarashi down with all the strength and pain in his heart. Naruto raised Nozarashi high above his head, his muscles straining as energy roared around him. The blade shimmered with intent, ready to strike. Just as the massive weapon began its descent, a blur of pink shot through the battlefield. Yachiru appeared midair and delivered a swift kick to Naruto's head. The impact cracked the ground beneath him as he crumpled to the earth, unconscious. The mighty Nozarashi slipped from his grip, embedding itself in the soil beside him before vanishing. Jiraiya exhaled heavily, his body trembling with exhaustion and the weight of narrowly escaping disaster. Slowly, he turned his weary gaze to Yachiru, who stood with hands on her hips, her bright grin unwavering. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse. She had saved his life. Her smile faltered. The playful gleam in her eyes darkened, replaced by something far more serious. Yachiru tilted her head, her grin stretching just enough to seem unnervingly sharp. "I didn't do it to save you," she said sweetly, brushing a speck of dust from her shoulder. "I did it to save him from doing something he'd regret." Jiraiya swallowed hard, watching her closely. She picked up Naruto with surprising ease. She glanced back, her eyes briefly glowing with fierce determination. With a burst of speed, she vanished into the horizon. Jiraiya rested a hand on his ribs, wincing from the battle's toll. Yet, it was the emotional weight that burdened him most. He let out a heavy sigh before turning to leave, each step heavy with a sense of failure. Ma and Pa Toad offered words of comfort before vanishing back to Mount Myaboku. With a pained expression, Jiraiya silently vowed to make things right. A few days later, in Konoha, Jiraiya sat in Tsunade's office, recounting the harrowing encounter. His voice was subdued, laden with regret. Tsunade listened in silence before leaning back in her chair with a sigh. She bluntly pointed out that she had warned him, though her tone carried a trace of sympathy. Jiraiya groaned, rubbing the back of his neck. He lamented that if he had just been there for Naruto from the beginning, none of this would have happened. Tsunade's stern expression softened. She placed a hand on his shoulder, reminding him that he couldn't change the past. All he could do was try to be there for Naruto now. The two shinobi stood on a quiet hilltop as twilight painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Jiraiya spoke somberly, recounting the battle in vivid detail, Naruto's immense strength, the overwhelming energy, the intense intent to harm. Kakashi's single visible eye widened. He was shocked to learn that Naruto had tried to kill Jiraiya. Jiraiya nodded grimly, warning that Naruto wouldn't hesitate if someone crossed his path. Knowing that they had known his parents and hadn't protected him had fueled his anger and hurt. He paused, cautioning Kakashi to be prepared if they met Naruto, as he would be aiming to kill. Meanwhile, in the shadowed halls of Root's headquarters, Danzo sat deep in thought. Reports of Naruto's growing power had reached him, and the loss of many operatives to the boy had frayed his patience. "It seems the time has come," he murmured, his fingers drumming against the table. "I can no longer afford to leave this matter to chance." His lips curled into a cold smile as he plotted. Naruto would be his, and the power of the Nine Tails would belong to Konoha, and to him. His mind was already working on a plan to ensure Naruto's capture, filling him with grim satisfaction. Far from Konoha, Naruto sat by a stream, his usual carefree demeanor replaced by a sour expression. The encounter with Jiraiya had left him in a foul mood, his emotions churning with anger and confusion. Yachiru sat nearby, her legs swinging lazily as she patted Naruto's head, urging him to stop frowning so much, playfully suggesting that he would scare all the fish away. Despite her light tone, genuine concern lingered in her voice. Naruto remained silent, his gaze fixed on the water. Suddenly, his body tensed as he sensed a powerful, oppressive presence approaching rapidly. The air around him crackled with energy, sending shivers racing down his spine. The ground trembled, and with a thunderous crash, a massive figure descended, creating a deep crater upon impact. Dust and debris billowed into the sky, obscuring the intruder. When the dust settled, a towering being stood in the center of the crater. Neutra Gilga grinned wickedly, his scythe resting on his shoulder as his sharp, predatory eyes locked onto Naruto. A mix of fear and exhilaration seized Naruto's heart. Yachiru's eyes widened in panic as she urged Naruto to run, warning him that he wasn't strong enough to face this foe. Naruto's instincts screamed at him to flee, but a reckless urge surged within him. His pulse raced and a wild smirk formed on his lips. He dismissed the idea of retreating. Neutra tilted his head, his grin widening as he recognized Naruto. He taunted him, noting how he looked different, smaller and weaker. Yachiru, sensing the danger, handed Naruto her Zanpakuto, her voice firm as she insisted he take it. Naruto accepted the weapon with a nod, tightening his grip around the hilt. Yachiru cautioned him that if things became too dangerous, they would retreat, her tone leaving no room for argument. Though Naruto grumbled, he nodded reluctantly. Neutra let out a booming laugh, his jagged teeth glinting as he declared it was time for the slaughter. Naruto stepped forward, his Ryatsu flaring as he prepared to face the monstrous Arrancar. The ground beneath him cracked, and the air between them grew dense with energy. Neutra raised his massive scythe, a twisted smile of pure joy on his face as he growled that he finally got to face Kenpachi. The air crackled with tension as Neutra sneered, mocking Naruto as he spun his scythe with ease. Naruto smirked in return, gripping Yachiru's Zanpakuto tightly. The weapon felt unfamiliar compared to his usual ones, but it resonated with a strange energy. He adjusted his stance, ready to spring into action. Yachiru stood a distance behind him, her face pale but resolute, cautioning him not to push himself too hard. Naruto didn't respond, his instincts torn between fleeing and charging forward. But the fire in his chest wouldn't let him back down. He declared it was time to begin. Neutra wasted no time. With a flick of his wrist, his scythe arced toward Naruto in a devastating horizontal slash. The sheer force of the attack created a shockwave that ripped through the ground, sending debris flying. Naruto dodged to the side, his movements a blur, and retaliated with a quick downward slash aimed at Neutra's side. The blade connected but failed to even scratch the Espada's body. Neutra's defenses absorbed the blow effortlessly, and he chuckled mockingly, challenging Naruto to do better. He lunged forward, his scythe spinning like a whirlwind as he aimed for Naruto. Naruto raised Yachiru's Zanpakuto just in time, blocking the strike. The impact sent him skidding backward, his feet digging trenches into the ground. His arms trembled under the weight of the blow, but he managed to stay on his feet. Neutra pressed forward, unleashing a relentless flurry of strikes. Each swing of Santa Teresa was brutal, forcing Naruto to stay on the defensive. Despite his enhanced strength and speed, he struggled to keep up. Neutra taunted him, questioning if this was truly a fight. Naruto growled, his Ryatsu flaring slightly as he pushed back against the onslaught. He ducked under a horizontal slash and countered with a spinning kick aimed at Neutra's torso. The kick connected, but again, Neutra's defenses rendered it ineffective. Before Naruto could react, Neutra's scythe came crashing down, grazing Naruto's shoulder and drawing a shallow but stinging wound. He leaped back, breathing heavily, his protective Ryatsu barely holding up. Neutra acknowledged Naruto's effort, liking the blood off his blade and declaring that this was nothing, taunting him about his weak Ryatsu. Naruto smirked, wiping the blood from his shoulder, confident that he would prove him wrong. Naruto's Ryatsu began to grow subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. Each exchange of blows forced him to adapt, his instincts sharpening as the battle progressed. He moved better now, aiming his strikes at exploiting openings in Neutra's relentless assault. But Neutra remained dominant, his superior Ryatsu and years of battle experience making him an almost insurmountable force. He caught Naruto off guard with a sudden movement, appearing behind him and slamming the hilt of Santa Teresa into Naruto's back. Naruto cried out as he was sent flying, crashing into a boulder with enough force to shatter it. Dust and debris filled the air as he struggled to his feet, his vision swimming. Neutra roared at him to get up, challenging him not to give up so easily. Naruto stood, his breathing ragged but his resolve unshaken. He acknowledged Neutra's toughness with grudging respect. Neutra smirked, confident that he was tougher than Naruto could handle. Naruto's Ryatsu flared again, stronger this time, as the ground beneath him cracked under the pressure. He charged forward, his movements a blur as he aimed a series of rapid slashes at Neutra. Each strike was more precise and powerful than the last, and for the first time, Neutra seemed to take him seriously. The Espada blocked each attack with ease, but the force behind Naruto's strikes began to push him back. Neutra admitted that Naruto was finally starting to entertain him. Naruto jumped back, raising a hand as yellow energy swirled around his palm, forming a Rasengan that glowed with his Ryatsu. He charged at Neutra, the Rasengan spinning furiously. Neutra smirked, waiting for the attack. At the last moment, he sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the Rasengan as Naruto's momentum carried him forward. Neutra retaliated with a spinning slash, the chain of Santa Teresa extending to catch Naruto across the back. Naruto grunted in pain but used the momentum to twist around, bringing Yachiru's Zanpakuto down in a wide arc. The blade struck Neutra's shoulder, and while it didn't pierce his Hiero, the impact forced the Espada to take a step back. Neutra acknowledged Naruto's persistence but declared it was time to end the warm-up. Naruto gritted his teeth, feeling his Ryatsu flare once more. His strength, speed, and endurance were steadily increasing, and he sensed the battle shifting. However, Neutra was far from finished. With a roar, Neutra unleashed a Siro from his mouth, the golden beam surging toward Naruto with devastating speed. Naruto barely managed to dodge, the blast carving a deep trench into the earth. The two warriors faced off again, both breathing heavily but neither willing to back down. The battle was far from over, and Naruto knew he would have to push himself to his limits and beyond to stand a chance. Neutra spun Santa Teresa once more, his grin widening as he challenged Naruto to show him more. The battlefield lay in ruins, deep trenches and shattered rocks marking the ferocity of the ongoing battle. Naruto stood hunched over, breathing raggedly, his body battered but unyielding. Across from him, Neutra loomed tall and menacing, Santa Teresa gleaming in his hand, his twisted grin widening. Neutra sneered, acknowledging that he would have to put in some effort after all. His spiritual pressure spiked, blanketing the area with an oppressive weight. He noted that Naruto had lasted longer than expected and promised to show him true despair. Naruto tightened his grip on Yachiru's Zanpakuto, steadying himself. His body ached, and his Ryatsu was still far from its peak, but he wouldn't back down. Neutra raised Santa Teresa over his head, his voice a low growl as he called upon its power. A surge of yellow energy erupted from his body, engulfing the area in blinding light. The ground trembled, and the air thickened with the sheer force of his Ryatsu. As the light subsided, Neutra's transformed form emerged, towering and monstrous. Two additional arms extended from his sides, each wielding a massive scythe identical to Santa Teresa. His carapace gleamed with an insect-like sheen, and the crescent moon horns on his head radiated a predatory aura. A twisted smile stretched across his face as he flexed his newfound limbs. The battlefield was a wasteland of shattered stone and debris. Neutra stood triumphant, his monstrous resurrection form gleaming in the dim light. His 6 sides twirled menacingly, the deadly weapons reflecting the intensity of the fight. Naruto lay on the ground, his grip on Nozarashi slack. Despite the numerous wounds and ragged breathing, his crimson eyes burned with unyielding defiance. Neutra sneered as he stepped closer, his eyes glinting with satisfaction. He acknowledged Naruto's effort but declared that this was where the boy would meet his end. Naruto attempted to rise but collapsed again, frustration and anger swirling in his mind. He didn't care about winning or losing. All that mattered was the fight, and it wasn't over yet. A voice rang out in his mind, sharp and fierce, urging him to get up. In the endless black void of his subconscious, Yachiru stood before him, crossing her arms. Her small frame radiated wild energy, and her playful demeanor was replaced by an intensity Naruto had never seen before. She chastised him for crawling on the ground like a bug, reminding him that he was Kenpachi and that he should fight and destroy. Naruto blinked in confusion, trying to express his frustration about the overwhelming opponent he faced. Yachiru interrupted, insisting that he had real power and just needed to learn how to use it. When Naruto demanded she show him, Yachiru grinned, her energy shifting playfully. She warned him that she would only do this once and that he shouldn't waste it. Before he could respond, her form dissolved into streaks of light, spiraling toward Nozarashi. Back on the battlefield, a massive surge of energy erupted from Naruto's fallen form, forcing Neutra to step back. The ground beneath Naruto cracked and splintered as his Ryatsu exploded outward, shaking the battlefield. Naruto's body convulsed as the transformation took hold. Muscles bulged, his skin turned crimson, and jagged black markings spread across his body. His eyes glowed with a fierce light, and a pair of horns jutted from his forehead, curling slightly. No Zaraki transformed in his hands, becoming a jagged, brutal cleaver. Naruto threw his head back and roared, the sound echoing across the battlefield like the cry of a beast unleashed. Noitra watched in stunned silence, his sides trembling in his hands as he questioned what Naruto had become. Naruto charged forward with a guttural growl, closing the distance in an instant. His newfound power was overwhelming. He moved with wild, untamed speed, each swing of his cleaver shattering the ground and sending shockwaves through the air. Noitra fought back with everything he had, his 6 sides whirling in a deadly dance. But no matter how many times he struck, Naruto pressed forward, his jagged blade carving through the Espada's defenses. Noitra roared in desperation, firing a barrage of Siros, each powerful enough to destroy a building. Naruto roared in defiance, cleaving through the blasts as if they were nothing. His berserk state drove him forward, unrelenting and unstoppable. As Naruto's blade connected, it severed 2 of Noitra's arms. The Espada staggered back, his remaining sides flailing wildly as he hissed in fury. He raised his hand, blood dripping from his palm, and vowed that if he was going down, he would take Naruto with him. Using his own blood as a catalyst, he began to form a Siro Oscurus. Naruto snarled, his horns gleaming as his Ryatsu flared. He gripped his cleaver tightly, his eyes locked on Noitra. With a fierce roar, Noitra fired the Siro Oscuras with all his might. Naruto charged straight into the blast, his cleaver raised high. The energy tore at his body, but he pushed through, his roar drowning out the sound of the explosion. With a final, earth-shattering swing, he cleaved through the Siro Oscuras, cutting through Noitra's Hierro. The Espada froze, his eyes wide with shock as blood poured from the wound. He staggered back, his sides falling from his hands, and uttered disbelief at his fate. Naruto stood over him, trembling from the toll of his transformation. Despite the cracks forming across his crimson skin, he raised his blade for one last strike. Naruto let out a fierce growl as he delivered a final, powerful swing, his cleaver slicing through Noitra's form. The remnants of the Espada fell to the ground, his dark eyes dimming as life slipped away. Amidst the aftermath, Naruto stood, breath ragged and uneven. His Bankai began to fade, the crimson hue of his skin returning to normal as the jagged blade transformed back to its original form. He stumbled, pain racking his body, yet he refused to fall. The battlefield was silent, save for the distant echo of his final roar. The fight was over. Naruto's body hit the ground heavily, his cleaver embedded in the earth beside him, trembling from the last swing. Crimson seeped from deep wounds, steam rising from his battered form. His skin, once fierce in Bankai, was now pale, with cracks spreading along his limbs like shattered porcelain. The power that had allowed him to defeat Noitra was now taking its toll. Laying broken and silent, barely breathing, Yachiru stood over him, her small frame trembling not from fear, but from pain. She knelt beside him, placing a hand on his face and gently brushing away the blood that dripped from his brow. She whispered that he had won, her voice thick with emotion. His eye barely opened, pupils unfocused, and his lips parted weakly as he expressed his inability to move. He questioned whether they had truly won. She nodded affirmatively, and he gave a shallow laugh, feeling as though he was dying. Yachiru's smile turned bittersweet as she leaned in close, her forehead touching his, promising to always be with him, even in the next life. Naruto's lips trembled as he asked if he would get another chance. His voice cracked, not from pain, but from fear and hope. She didn't answer. His eye closed, his chest fell one last time, and then stilled. Inside Naruto's mindscape, sewer waters stirred, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Kurama, the nine-tailed fox, stood tall, his massive tail swaying as if in celebration. He noted that the prison was cracking and that Naruto was dying, but then he sensed something shifting. The storm had not come from the boy's death, but from something older. Back in the real world, Yachiru sat cross-legged beside Naruto's body, unmoving, her hand resting on his chest, still hoping for a pulse. The wind rustled the trees gently, and then a presence emerged. A shadow stepped forward, gliding silently, its spiritual pressure thick and overwhelming. Yachiro's eyes lit up with joy as she recognized the figure and leaped into the arms of a woman cloaked in shadow, her long black hair drifting like mist. She pleaded with the woman to save Kenny, expressing her unwavering belief in her power. The woman looked at the broken boy on the ground, a slow grin creeping across her lips, acknowledging that he had finally arrived. A day later, Naruto's eyes snapped open, returning to consciousness with a violent gasp. He was whole again, sitting up with wide eyes and trembling arms. His body was completely healed. He muttered in shock, questioning how and why he was alive after being gone. Yachiro beamed beside him, wrapping her arms around his neck in celebration. Before she could answer his questions, the door creaked open, and a familiar figure stepped in. Naruto's eyes widened as he recognized her from a flash of memory, a battlefield, swords clashing, her piercing eyes. He remembered killing her, yet now she stood before him, smiling. Despite the illogicality of it all, he felt a tear roll down his cheek, overwhelmed with happiness at her presence. 2 years later, Naruto stood at the edge of a cliff, the wind tugging at his long yellow-black hair. His blue eyes were sharp and reflective, his once youthful face matured by discipline and pain. Beside him, Unohana stood with arms folded, a testament to the brutal training he had undergone under her guidance. He had regained memories of his past life, learned discipline, refined his swordsmanship, and gained full control of his Bankai. She asked if he was ready, and he nodded, expressing his gratitude. She smiled with a hint of menace, reminding him that he wasn't allowed to die until she got her revenge. He paled at her words, recalling the relentless training he had endured for 2 years. Yachiro jumped onto his shoulder, eager to move forward. As he took one last look back, he bid farewell to Unohana. In the land of rivers, the battlefield lay silent beneath dark clouds. Kakashi, Sakura, Chio, Shikamaru, Ino, and Choji stood frozen, weary and hopeless, before Gaara's lifeless body pinned beneath Deidara's foot. Shikamaru muttered bitterly about their failure, while Sakura whispered in grief. Deidara laughed, claiming another victim had fallen, but suddenly, a voice echoed from the heavens, calm and sorrowful, apologizing for being late. Everyone looked up to see a silhouette against the setting sun, descending slowly. Naruto landed silently, his massive cleaver resting on his shoulder, with Yachiro perched atop it, swinging her legs. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and his blue eyes, once bright, were now sharp and cold, focused solely on Gaara. This was not the Naruto they remembered. He was silent, composed, and dangerous. As he descended, Yachiro reassured him that it was okay and that they would make them pay. Naruto raised his head, locking eyes with the Akatsuki, the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, ready to face whatever came next. Dangerous. Sakura felt a mix of shock and disbelief as she whispered Naruto's name, hope flickering within her like a fragile flame. He remained silent, his gaze fixed on his fallen friend. With a slow step forward, he tightened his grip on the handle of his blade. The atmosphere grew heavy, an oppressive pressure settling over the battlefield that had nothing to do with chakra. Yachiro, perched on the blade, gently patted his head and reassured him that they would make their enemies pay. Finally, Naruto raised his head, his cold blue eyes locking onto the 2 Akatsuki members. Sasori's gruff voice rasped from within Hirako, acknowledging Naruto as the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki and suggesting that their fortune had turned. Naruto stepped forward, placing himself between the Konoha shinobi and the Akatsuki. He commanded them to stand back, his voice quiet yet authoritative. Sakura took a step toward him, her hand outstretched, but his glare stopped her cold. It was a look devoid of warmth and recognition, a dangerous expression that felt foreign to her. Flinching as if struck, Sakura was overwhelmed by the memory of her last words to him, hateful and unforgivable. Guilt twisted in her gut, sharp and painful, causing her to stumble back with tears welling in her eyes. Naruto declared that he had a score to settle with the Akatsuki, warning them to get out of the way or face the consequences. His words hung in the air, chilling and absolute. Kakashi's single visible eye widened as he recalled Jiraiya's warning about Naruto's transformation. This was no longer the boy he had mentored. This was a warrior forged in pain. Shikamaru felt a cold sweat break out on his brow, recognizing the suffocating pressure that surrounded them. The Naruto they knew was gone, replaced by an intimidating figure. Ino and Choji exchanged nervous glances, sharing an unspoken fear. Just as the tension peaked, Team Guy arrived in a blur of motion, taking in the grim scene. Lee announced their arrival, his usual fiery spirit dampened by the sight of Gaara. He then turned to Naruto, expressing relief at his return. Tenten remarked on how different he looked, while Neji activated his Byakugan, sensing a terrifying energy swirling around Naruto. Deidara, feeling ignored, snapped in frustration, demanding attention for his artistic creation. This provoked Naruto's killing intent to explode outward, a cold and sharp pressure that promised nothing but danger. He roared for everyone to get out of the way before he would take action against them. Yachiru, noticing the hesitation, decided to help by releasing a fraction of her own spiritual pressure, encouraging everyone to clear the way. Kakashi ordered the Konoha shinobi to retreat, a mix of fear and sorrow in their hearts. Before leaving, Chiyo met Naruto's gaze, instructing him to secure the Kazekage's body. He nodded in acknowledgement. With the battlefield cleared, only Naruto, Yachiru, and Gaara's body remained against the two Akatsuki members. A feral smirk spread across Naruto's face as he pointed his massive blade at them, exuding arrogant confidence. He even offered them a free hit, challenging them to do their worst. Sasori warned him of the flaw of arrogance, while Dura, incensed, declared that he would blow Naruto to pieces. Without hesitation, Dura unleashed a dozen clay birds that spiraled toward Naruto, followed by a series of powerful explosions that engulfed his position in smoke and dust. Sasori took advantage of the chaos, launching a torrent of poisoned Senbon into the cloud. As the dust settled, Deidara's grin faded. Naruto stood unscathed, surrounded by shattered Senbon, his golden Ryatsu having acted as an invisible shield. Sasori's silence was heavy with meaning as he cautioned Deidara to be on guard, reminding him that Naruto had defeated formidable opponents before. Naruto's smirk widened as he taunted them, expressing boredom with their efforts. Deidara's fury escalated, threatening to unleash his true art if he were not needed alive. Naruto chuckled darkly, asserting that their assumption of having a choice was their first mistake. He took a deliberate step forward, raising no Zaraki and declaring that it was now his turn. To be continued. Deidara's face was a mask of indignant rage, while Sasori's Hiriko puppet remained unervingly still, analyzing the boy who had effortlessly shrugged off their combined opening assault. Naruto's voice was a low growl that vibrated with power as he stated that their first mistake was assuming they had a choice in the matter. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, the ground cracking under the sheer pressure of his rising Ryatsu, and declared that it was his turn. Before either Akatsuki member could react, Naruto vanished. He moved with raw acceleration, tearing a trench in the dirt, and reappeared directly in front of Sasori, Nozarashi already descending in a brutal two-handed overhead chop. The impact was deafening as Sasori's poisoned iron tail shot up to intercept the massive cleaver. The tail bent violently under the strain, sparks flying as Hiriko's entire puppet body was driven halfway into the ground. With a guttural roar, Naruto pressed his attack, forcing Sasori to commit all his focus to defense. In that split second, Yachiru leaped from his shoulder, a tiny pink blur. She landed beside Gaara's body and, with a strength that defied her size, hoisted the Kazekage over her shoulder and vanished from the immediate battlefield. Deidara's eyes widened at the girl's impossible speed as he shrieked in disbelief. Sasori's voice rasped from within the half-buried puppet, urging Deidara to focus on the primary target. Naruto smirked, settling into a low stance, stating that he didn't want any distractions. Deidara, ignoring him, moved his hands into his pouches, molding clay with furious speed. He launched a volley of small, scuttling clay spiders that swarmed towards Naruto from all angles. Simultaneously, Sasori's Hiriko puppet opened its mouth to unleash a torrent of poison Senbon, creating a classic pincer attack designed to force a target to choose between being shredded or blown up. Naruto didn't choose. He stomped his foot, and his Ryatsu erupted, creating a physical shockwave of golden energy. The ground around him buckled, and the incoming Senbon were blasted off course, clattering harmlessly to the sides. The clay spiders tumbled, their delicate forms cracking before they could detonate. Frustrated, Deidara howled about his art, but Naruto ignored him, charging again with no Zaraki held low. Sasori reacted, launching Hiriko's torpedo-shaped arm towards him. The arm prepared to unleash its hail of needles, but Naruto swung no Zaraki in a clean, horizontal arc. The attack was so fast and precise that, for a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire prosthetic arm slid apart in two perfect halves, crashing uselessly to the ground. Sasori was silent, stunned by the speed and power with which his weapon had been dismantled. Naruto pointed the tip of his cleaver at the stunned Hiriko, stating that the puppet armor was a nuisance. He swung no Zaraki, sending a wave of pure, compressed golden energy forward. Sasori's heavy back shell took the brunt of the impact, shattering like glass and scattering the Hiriko puppet's wooden limbs and mechanisms across the battlefield. From the wreckage, the true Sasori emerged, his youthful puppet body gleaming. A thick, coiled cable shot from his abdomen, its poison tip aimed directly at Naruto's heart. Naruto simply tilted his head, raised his free hand, and caught the stinger, his grip like a vice. The potent poison sizzled against his Ryatsu-infused skin, unable to penetrate. With a single, effortless tug, he ripped the entire cable out of Sasori's abdomen, tossing it aside. Sasori stumbled back, disbelief flickering across his usually impassive puppet face. His ultimate surprise attack, a guaranteed kill against any normal shinobi, had been neutralized with casual disdain. Deidara screamed from above, now airborne on a massive clay dragon, declaring that he would teach Naruto to look down on his art. The dragon's mouth opened, spitting out a smaller, bird-shaped guided missile that homed in on Naruto. Without even looking up, Naruto kept his eyes locked on Sasori as he swung no Zaraki behind him in a lazy, backhanded arc. The cleaver met the clay bird mid-flight, slicing it neatly in two, and the two halves exploded harmlessly to his sides. Naruto remarked that Deidara was annoying and that he would deal with him later, turning his attention back to Sasori. Sasori, having regained his composure, raised his hand and declared that Naruto was a fool to face his true masterpiece. A scroll unrolled from his back, and he commanded everyone to witness the power that had felled a nation, the Red Secret Technique, performance of 100 puppets. The ground erupted as 100 human puppets, each one a former warrior with their abilities grotesquely preserved, rose from the earth. They swarmed forward, a tidal wave of blades, chains, and poisoned weapons. Naruto's smirk widened into a feral grin as he planted his feet, gripping no Zaraki with both hands, and began to spin. He became a vortex of destruction. No Zaraki's massive blade carved through the puppet army like a scythe through wheat. Wood splintered, metal shrieked, and limbs were sent flying. The coordinated attack of 100 skilled warriors was reduced to a chaotic whirlwind of shredded parts. In seconds, the legendary army was nothing but a field of scrap. Sasori stood frozen, his chakra threads slack. His ultimate technique, his pride, his art, had been dismantled in less than a minute. He whispered in disbelief, questioning how this could happen. Naruto pointed the tip of no Zaraki at the puppeteer, declaring that he was just trash. He dashed forward, closing the distance in the blink of an eye. The poles on Sasori's hips flared to life, the 5 large blades on each spinning into a defensive buzzsaw. It was a monstrous close-range defense, but it didn't matter. Naruto swung, and no Zaraki met the spinning blades, shearing through them as if they were made of paper. The cleaver continued its path, slicing deep into Sasori's puppet torso. The impact sent the master puppeteer flying, his body crashing to the ground, chest cavity opened. Dara watched from above, his jaw slack with horror. Sasori, the master, was being completely dominated. He felt a mix of shock and fury as he called out to his fallen partner. Naruto stood over Sasori's broken form, noting that he was still breathing and remarking on his toughness. From the shattered chest cavity, Sasori's living core, the cylinder of flesh that was his only weak point, glowed faintly. In a final, desperate act, he transferred it, a streak of light shooting from his broken body into his last hidden masterpiece. The third Kazekage puppet, concealed nearby, sprang to life. With Sasori's voice echoing from it, the Kazekage puppet roared, declaring that Naruto would not mock his art. Iron sand erupted from its mouth, forming into a massive, triangular spear, which shot forward, spinning like a drill. Naruto did not bother to block. Instead, he took one final, powerful step, gripping Nozarashi with both hands, declaring that it was over. He brought the cleaver down in a single, devastating overhead slash. There was no grand explosion, only a quiet, final sound as the iron sand spear split perfectly in two. The third Kazekage puppet, Sasori's most prized creation, also split perfectly in two. Sasori's core, housed within the puppet, followed suit. The two halves of the Kazekage puppet clattered to the ground, and silence fell over the battlefield. Naruto rested the massive Nozarashi on his shoulder, his breathing steady. He turned his cold blue eyes upward to the horrified face of Dara, who was alone in the sky. He wondered where they had left off. A heavy silence settled over. The ruined landscape, broken only by the gentle whisper of the wind. The two halves of the third Kazekage puppet lay inert on the ground, a monument to a master's final failure. Sasori of the red sand, the genius who sought eternity in his art, was gone. High above, Dara stared down from his clay dragon, his single visible eye wide with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a profound emptiness. He whispered his partner's name, the sound catching in his throat. Sasori had been his rival in art, the one person whose quiet philosophy had always been the perfect foil to his own fleeting passion. Defeated and erased, treated like trash. A tremor ran through his body, starting in his hands and growing until he was vibrating with suppressed emotion. His gaze fixed on Naruto, who stood calmly below, Nozarashi resting on his shoulder as if he hadn't just obliterated an S-rank legend. Deidara's voice was low and trembling as he demanded to know what Naruto had done. Naruto merely tilted his head, his expression unreadable, and remarked that he had taken out the trash, as if it were a simple task. The casual tone ignited Deidara's fury. He shrieked, declaring that Sasori's art was eternal and had true beauty, insisting that Naruto would never understand. Tears streamed down his face, not of sadness, but of pure rage. He had argued with Sasori and insulted his philosophy, but there had always been respect. Now that was gone, and the monster below was the cause. Deidara whispered that his art was the only true art, and a terrifying calmness descended upon him. His fury coalesced into a focused point of resolve as he proclaimed that art was an explosion, a fleeting moment of sublime beauty. Sasori had never understood that, but now he would create his ultimate masterpiece, an explosion that would honor Sasori's memory and prove his philosophy supreme. He began to form hand seals, his movements sharp and deliberate. Down below, Naruto watched with a flicker of interest, tightening his grip on Nozarashi. He recognized the chakra and felt a bloodthirsty grin beginning to form, sensing that this would be a real fight. Deidara's clay dragon descended, landing a safe distance away. He hopped off, his face a mask of serene, fanatical devotion to his cause. He declared that Naruto thought he had won, but he was merely the canvas for Deidara's magnum opus. Creating a single shadow clone, the clone stood before him, a perfect replica, and nodded solemnly. Deidara instructed his clone to show Naruto the ultimate art. He then leaped back onto his dragon and flew high into the sky, putting as much distance as possible between himself and the battlefield. He wasn't retreating, he was getting a front-row seat for the show. Down below, the Deidara clone began to tear at the stitches on its chest, revealing a grotesque, fanged mouth hidden there. It pulled out a large lump of clay and began to knead it into the chest mouth, a process that was both unsettling and awe-inspiring. Naruto watched, intrigued. He expressed his disappointment at the clone's choice to fight him with another version of itself. The clone looked up, a blissful smile on its face. Black veins began to spread from its chest, crawling across its skin like cracks in porcelain. It proclaimed that this was not a fight but a form of art. The energy radiating from the clone became immense, a suffocating pressure that dwarfed everything Deidara had shown before. The very air began to vibrate. The clone declared its technique, and Naruto's excitement grew. Yachiru, who had returned to his shoulder, commented on the impending explosion, noting it looked like it would be significant. Naruto stood firm, not moving to flee. To a warrior like him, who had faced formidable opponents, this was not a threat to be avoided but a challenge to confront. He hefted Nozarashi, planting his feet firmly in the cracked earth. His golden Ryatsu began to pour from him in a dense, steady torrent that wrapped around him like a shroud. The Deidara clone began to shrink, condensing the massive amount of chakra into a single, infinitesimally small point. The black veins covered its entire body, transforming it into a human star, on the verge of going supernova. The clone screamed its declaration, its body glowing with blinding white light, and unleashed its ultimate technique. At first, there was no sound, only a silent, expanding sphere of pure, white annihilation. It vaporized the ground, the rocks, and the air itself. The world was bleached of all color and substance, consumed by the beautiful, terrible finality of Deidara's ultimate art. The explosion swelled, rushing toward Naruto, a wave of total destruction. Naruto stood his ground, a lone figure against the impending chaos. He raised his massive cleaver, gripping it with both hands. He challenged the destructive force, proclaiming his intent to show what real power looked like. Pouring immense Ryatsu into his blade, the golden energy condensed, swirling around the jagged edge of Nozarashi until it shone like a miniature sun. He swung, not aiming for the center of the blast, but to cut the explosion itself. With a decisive move, he unleashed his technique. Nozarashi moved, and for a moment, it felt as if the world held its breath. The blade tore a wound in the fabric of reality, creating a thin, black line of absolute nothingness. The expanding sphere of destruction hit the line and split apart. The apocalyptic explosion, capable of wiping a village from the map, was cleaved perfectly in two. The two massive hemispheres of energy were redirected, parting around Naruto as if flowing around a stone in a river. They continued their path, carving immense craters into the landscape, but the space where Naruto stood remained untouched. When the light faded, the devastation was absolute. The battlefield was gone, replaced by a massive, smoking gouge in the earth. In the center of it all, Naruto stood in a small, pristine circle of untouched ground, Nozarashi resting on his shoulder. He looked up at the sky, at the tiny speck that was the real Deidara. Naruto's grin was gone, replaced by an expression of pure disappointment. He called out, his voice echoing across the silent wasteland, questioning the worth of Deidara's so-called ultimate art. He scoffed, the sound dripping with contempt, dismissing the performance as boring. High in the sky, Deidara could only stare, his artistic spirit shattered. His masterpiece had been cut in half. The world was a wasteland. A massive, semicircular scar, miles wide, marked the earth, a testament to Deidara's final, failed masterpiece. High in the sky, a lone clay dragon beat its wings, its rider staring down at the devastation, his spirit as broken as his crushed arm. Deidara whispered in disbelief, grappling with the reality of his failure. Down below, in the pristine circle of untouched ground, Naruto looked up, shifting the weight of Nozarashi on his shoulder. He had expected a challenge, a thrill, a climactic end to a worthy opponent. All he got was a loud noise and a lot of dust. He channeled his golden Ryatsu into the blade, the jagged edge humming with power. With a single, fluid motion, he swung, sending a colossal wave of cutting pressure towards the heavens. It was not aimed to kill, it was a statement, a dismissal. Deidara glared down one last time, his face a canvas of grief and defeat. In the next instant, he and his dragon vanished, retreating into the clouds. His attack continued its inexorable course, slicing through the clouds and disappearing over the horizon, leaving a golden scar across the evening sky. Naruto sighed, adjusting the massive weight of Nozarashi on his shoulder. The Shirkai was now his constant companion, a heavy reminder of his true nature. Yachiru commented on the encounter, noting that Deidara was all sizzle and no substance. Naruto agreed, his voice flat, and turned his gaze toward the direction Yachiru had taken Gaara. When they arrived, the scene was somber. A large group of Suna shinobi had gathered, including a recovered Kankuro and his sister Temari. The atmosphere was heavy with grief, and in the center of the crowd stood Gaara, revitalized, beside Lady Chiyo, who lay peacefully with a faint smile on her face. Naruto understood the sacrifice she had made for Gaara. The Suna ninja paid their respects, their quiet murmurs a eulogy for the woman who had saved their Kazekage. After the solemn rites were concluded, Gaara approached Naruto. For a long moment, the two Jinchuriki, the two friends, simply looked at each other, an entire conversation passing between them without a single word. Gaara finally expressed his gratitude, his voice steady. He extended his hand, reiterating his offer for Naruto to always have a home in Sunagakure. After a moment's hesitation, Naruto clasped Gaara's hand firmly, recalling the promise they had made 2 years ago. He acknowledged the offer with a nod, indicating he would keep it in mind. With a final, meaningful look, Gaara turned and led his people away, beginning the long, somber journey home. Then, silence enveloped the area, an awkward, suffocating silence. Naruto stood alone, Yachiru perched on his shoulder, facing the shinobi of Konoha. Familiar faces Kakashi, Sakura, Shikamaru, Ino, Choji, Gai, Lee, Niji, and Tenten now felt like strangers. Sakura was the first to step forward, her hands clenched at her sides, her head bowed. She expressed her deep regret for her past actions, admitting that she had been selfish and cruel, throwing away their friendship in her own pain. Naruto listened, his expression cold and impassive, offering nothing in response. Lee stepped forward next, his usual fiery demeanor replaced by a desperate sincerity. He urged Naruto to return to the leaf, insisting that his youthful spirit belonged there. Naruto turned his head, looking at Lee with a deadpan expression, and asked why he should return to a village that had treated him poorly for 13 years. The question silenced them all, leaving them at a loss for words. Kakashi finally spoke, quietly but firmly, reminding Naruto that there were people in Konoha who cared about him: Irika-sensei, the Ikarakus, and his friends. He paused, his gaze heavy with unspoken emotions. A grim smile spread across Naruto's face, a sight that sent a chill through the group. He confronted Kakashi, questioning his absence during Naruto's struggles, demanding to know why he hadn't been there when he was needed most. Kakashi's expression crumbled, revealing the weight of his own losses. He admitted to being a coward, sharing the pain of his past, the loss of his mother, his father's tragic end, and the deaths of his teammates. He expressed his belief that he was cursed, convinced that anyone he cared for would suffer. He acknowledged that keeping his distance was a pathetic excuse and that he should have tried harder for Naruto and those who had been lost. The group stood in stunned silence, witnessing their sensei's vulnerability. Tears streamed down Sakura and Ino's faces as they began to understand the depth of Kakashi's hidden pain. Shikamaru and Choji looked away, feeling the uncomfortable weight of the moment, while Niji's stoicism cracked, revealing a flicker of empathy. Naruto sighed heavily, the grim smile fading as he replaced it with weary understanding. He reflected that if their roles were reversed, he would have been there for Kakashi. The admission struck Kakashi deeply, feeling the weight of Naruto's words. However, Naruto then declared that he would return to Konoha, but not for the village or for them. He made it clear that he would only be sticking around for a while. Kakashi managed a weak smile, relieved that Naruto was coming back at all. Naruto turned his cold gaze on Sakura one last time, reminding her of the promise he made to bring Sasuke back. He affirmed that he always keeps his promises. Sakura could only nod, speechless, while the others exchanged looks filled with a mix of hope, fear, and uncertainty. Naruto was coming back, but he was not the same. This was not a homecoming but the return of a storm. As he began the long walk back, Naruto's thoughts drifted to a single name echoing in his mind: Danzo. A few days later, they arrived at the main gate of Kanahagakure. Izumo and Kotetsu, the eternal gate guards, were dozing in their chairs. As the large group approached, they straightened up, their eyes widening as they counted the members. Izumo welcomed Kakashi and Guy back, but his jaw dropped when he recognized Naruto. Kotetsu rubbed his eyes in disbelief, unable to comprehend the sight before him. Naruto walked past the gate, his steps silent and sure, re-entering the village that had cast him out. The storm had come home. The massive gates of Kanehagakure loomed before them, a monument to a home that was never truly his. Naruto walked forward without breaking stride, the colossal, jagged form of Nozarashi resting on his shoulder like an old friend. Yachiru sat perched atop the blade, a splash of cheerful pink against the grim steel. Izumo and Kotetsu snapped to attention, their initial shock morphing into disbelief as they took in the weapon he carried, wondering what in the world it was. It looked like it was made to fell a castle wall, not to fight a ninja. Izumo's mind raced, trying to make sense of the scene. Naruto didn't even glance at them, no wave, no grin, just an unsettling silence. It felt as if they were merely part of the scenery. The old Naruto would have been yelling about getting ramen by now. They were completely ignored. The group walked past them, a silent, tense procession escorting a storm back into the heart of their village. The moment they stepped onto the main street, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The bustling sounds of daily life faltered. Shopkeepers froze mid-transaction. Children who had been laughing and playing stopped, their eyes widening as they pointed. Whispers erupted like wildfire, spreading from storefront to storefront. Is that the Fox Boy? Look at that weapon. He's a monster. I knew it. He finally snapped. The villagers didn't see a hero returning, they saw their deepest fears made manifest. They saw the demon they had always whispered about, now returned from the wilderness, carrying a blade that seemed fit for a monster. Mothers pulled their children behind them, men glared with a mixture of fear and disdain, their hands clenching into fists. The air grew thick with their collective revulsion. Naruto didn't care. He walked through their glares and whispers as if they were nothing more than a mild breeze, his gaze fixed forward, his expression a mask of cold indifference. The Konoha shinobi trailing him, however, felt every hateful stare like a physical blow. Their recent mission had been a failure. They had arrived too late to save the Kazekage and had been ordered back by a Naruto they no longer recognized. They didn't know the specifics of what happened after they left, only that Naruto had stayed to confront two Akatsuki members alone. Seeing him unscathed and impossibly calm, they could only draw one conclusion. Kakashi's single eye was hard as flint. He had faced two S-rank Akatsuki members and returned without a scratch. Deidara and Sasori. What kind of battle even took place? To come back looking like this. He hadn't just won, he had dominated. The power Jiraiya had spoken of was even greater than he had feared. Sakura flinched, her head bowed in shame. This was what he lived with every day, and she had added to it. She had been just like them. The fact that he was now strong enough to handle threats that would have killed her, and that he did it all after she had cast him aside, only twisted the knife deeper. Lee's fists were clenched at his sides, his brow furrowed with righteous anger. They do not see his youthful fire. They only see their own fear. He has returned a true powerhouse, a hero who has clearly triumphed, and yet they scorn him. This is an injustice. Shikamaru clicked his tongue in annoyance, his usual lazy demeanor gone. He observed the pointing fingers and the fearful whispers of the crowd. Idiots. They have no idea what's going on. They just see the boy they've always hated back with a big sword. What a drag. Dealing with this level of ignorance is the most troublesome thing of all. Ino and Choji stayed close, unnerved by the hostility. It was one thing to hear about Naruto's treatment. It was another to walk through the thick, suffocating cloud of it. Kakashi watched the villagers, and then he watched Naruto's complete indifference to them. He had built a wall around himself, a wall so high that none of this could touch him anymore. They had let this happen. Their procession came to a halt in front of a familiar, comforting establishment, Ichirakuramen. The warm, steamy aroma drifted out, a stark contrast to the cold hostility of the street. Naruto stopped. He looked at the curtain, a flicker of nostalgia passing through his eyes for the briefest moment. He glanced at the massive blade on his shoulder, then at the narrow entrance. With a quiet sigh, he focused his will. The colossal form of Nozarashi shimmered, shrinking down until it was the size of a standard, if still brutally designed, cleaver. It was still large but now manageable enough to carry at his side. Yuichiro hopped off his shoulder as he entered. Finally. I'm starving, Kenny. Inside, the familiar faces were a balm to a wound Naruto hadn't realized was still sore. Irika sat at the counter, laughing at something Konohamaru had said. The rest of Team Ebisu, Moegi and Udon, were eagerly slurping down their noodles. Tucci was behind the counter, a warm smile on his face, while Ayam was refilling a glass of water. The moment Naruto stepped through the curtain, all of them lit up. Naruto! Irika exclaimed, his chair scraping against the floor as he stood up so fast he nearly knocked it over. Boss, you're back! Konohamaru yelled, jumping to his feet with a wide grin. Welcome home, Naruto. Tucci boomed, his smile reaching his eyes. Ayam's face broke into a relieved, radiant grin. For the first time since his return, the cold mask on Naruto's face cracked. A small, genuine, almost hesitant smile touched his lips. Hey, old man, Ayam Nichan. Irika rushed forward, pulling him into a tight, fatherly hug. You idiot, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You had us all so worried. Don't you ever do that again, you hear me? Naruto tensed for a moment before slowly, awkwardly, patting his former teacher on the back. Yeah. I hear you. When they pulled apart, everyone's eyes fell on the tiny girl who was now tugging on Naruto's sleeve. Kenny, are we gonna eat or what? My tummy's rumbling. Yuichiro declared. Konohamaru pointed at her. Hey, who's the kid boss? Naruto glanced down at Yuichiro, ruffling her pink hair. The lie came easily, a necessary shield. This is Yuichiro. Found her on my travels. She's an orphan. I guess you could say she's like my little sister now. A little sister. Kakashi thought, standing just outside the curtain and observing the scene. That's Nozarashi. He's hiding her true nature in plain sight. He's learned deception. The reunion was warm, a small island of acceptance in an ocean of hostility. Naruto ate his ramen, the familiar taste a ghost of a life he'd left behind. He answered their questions vaguely, speaking of training and traveling, the words hollow but enough to satisfy them. After the meal, the group made their way to the Hokage Tower. Naruto's blade remained in its smaller, more discreet form. When they entered the office, Tsunade was pacing, her expression a mixture of anxiety and frustration. The moment she saw him, her composure broke. Naruto. She closed the distance in an instant, wrapping him in a hug so powerful it lifted him off the ground. She squeezed him tight, burying her face in his shoulder, her body trembling with relief. It wasn't the embrace of a Hokage welcoming a shinobi, it was the embrace of a grandmother who believed she had lost him forever. She whispered, her voice cracking, expressing her relief and love. Naruto stood stiffly in her hold, his hands at his sides. He felt the genuine warmth and fierce affection surrounding him. Thanks to Kurama, he knew she had never betrayed him. Slowly, hesitantly, he raised his arms and returned the embrace, feeling a flicker of warmth break through his cold exterior. He murmured into her shoulder that he was back, and the moment was filled with emotion. The Hokage's office was enveloped in a tense silence. Tsunade held Naruto tightly, her relief evident. After a moment of surprise, he had returned her embrace, and the warmth between them was undeniable. The door creaked open, and Shizune entered, carrying a stack of medical reports. She paused, her eyes widening as she took in the scene, and the scrolls tumbled from her hands, scattering across the floor. Seeing Naruto, she was overwhelmed with emotion and rushed forward to pull him into another hug, tears of relief streaming down her face. They had all been so worried about him. Once the emotional greetings subsided, the atmosphere shifted back to business. Tsunade sat behind her desk, her expression turning serious as she addressed Naruto. She inquired if his return was permanent, and the rest of the Konoha shinobi held their breath in anticipation. Naruto's smile faded, replaced by a neutral mask. He stated simply that he was staying for a while, revealing that he had unfinished business to attend to. His eyes held a flicker of determination that hinted at his true purpose. Tsunade sighed, disappointment washing over her. It was unfortunate he wouldn't commit to staying for good, but she accepted his decision with a heavy heart, grateful to have him back at all. She then turned her attention to the pink-haired girl who had been quietly observing. Naruto placed a hand on Yachiru's head, ready with a cover story. He introduced her as an orphan he had found during his travels, explaining that she had been with him for a while and was like a little sister to him. Tsunade's eyes softened, welcoming Yachiru to Konoha and promising to help her settle in. Kakashi remained silent, contemplating the bond Naruto had formed with his weapon, realizing that Naruto had created a connection he was willing to call family. Later that day, the group gathered at one of the training grounds. The initial tension had eased into an awkward camaraderie as they attempted to bridge the 2.5-year gap that felt like a century. As Naruto stood apart, observing the setting sun, a quiet figure approached him. Hinata stood there, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. However, her eyes were filled with a steady resolve. Before he could respond, she closed the distance and wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug. He froze, surprised by her boldness. Her embrace was firm, filled with unspoken words of worry and relief she had held onto for years. She expressed her joy at his return, affirming that she had never believed he left because of weakness, but rather because he was hurting. Naruto remained silent for a moment, feeling the sincerity in her words. He gently patted her on the back, thanking her softly. As she pulled away, her face flushed but proud, another voice filled the air with fiery passion. Rock Lee approached, eyes gleaming with excitement, declaring that Naruto's return was a triumph for the flames of youth and requesting a friendly bout to celebrate. Naruto raised an eyebrow, asking if he meant to spar. Lee confirmed with enthusiasm, recounting their last mission against a powerful foe from the Akatsuki. He expressed his admiration for Naruto's strength, wanting to measure his own against the powerhouse Naruto had become. A rare grin spread across Naruto's face as he recalled their first encounter, where he had faced a one-sided defeat. He accepted Lee's challenge, and Lee's excitement was palpable. Naruto set down his massive cleaver, and Yachiru scampered over to a nearby tree to watch. The two faced each other in the center of the training ground. Naruto stated that they would not use ninjutsu, opting for a pure contest of taijutsu. Lee agreed, settling into his strong fist stance, while Naruto remained relaxed, hands in his pockets. He decided to dial back his power to match Lee's base level, curious to see what Lee's hard work was truly worth. Lee charged forward, unleashing a flurry of high and low kicks, moving like a green blur. The old Naruto would have struggled to keep up with such speed. The new Naruto swayed his body, narrowly dodging a high kick and allowing a low kick to whistle past his shin. Lee's eyes widened in surprise, but he didn't stop. He seamlessly transitioned into a spinning low kick aimed at Naruto's back. Without even turning, Naruto took a small step to the side, causing Lee's foot to sweep through empty air. Lee expressed his admiration, noting Naruto's speed, but declared that he was just getting started. With a burst of energy, he opened the first gate of opening, and a visible aura of green energy exploded around him. His speed doubled, and he appeared in front of Naruto, launching a direct punch. Naruto raised a hand, catching Lee's fist with a dull thud, remaining completely still. Naruto calmly stated that it was his turn. He pushed Lee's fist aside and delivered a simple, straight jab. It wasn't flashy or fast, but it carried immense weight. Lee crossed his arms to block, but the force of the blow sent him skidding back 10 feet, his sandals carving deep furrows in the ground. Lee, filled with excitement, acknowledged Naruto's incredible power and opened the second gate of healing and the third gate of life. His skin flushed red as he became a whirlwind of energy, blitzing Naruto with a relentless barrage of punches and kicks. Yet, Naruto remained in place, deflecting each blow with minimal movement, turning his wrist, shifting his shoulder, tilting his head. It was as if he anticipated every attack before Lee even threw it. Naruto recognized Lee's growth with genuine interest, allowing his own power to rise slightly to match the output of the third gate. He caught one of Lee's flying kicks, gripping his ankle tightly, and remarked that Lee was holding back too much. With a powerful heave, he spun Lee around and flung him into the air. Lee roared from above, declaring that he was opening the fourth gate of pain and the fifth gate of closing. The air crackled with power as he descended like a comet, ready to deliver a devastating blow. Naruto's grin returned, wider this time, filled with excitement. His golden energy flared around him, matching Lee's output perfectly. He met Lee's descending strike with an open palm. The impact created a shockwave that shook the entire training ground, leaving the spectators in awe. Lee was suspended in midair, his most powerful strike halted by Naruto's single hand. Naruto's eyes gleamed with the thrill of the fight, and he noted that things were getting interesting. The training ground fell silent, with every spectator holding their breath. The Konoha 11 and their Jonin sensei watched in disbelief as Lee unleashed the power of the fifth gate, only to be stopped by Naruto's calm demeanor. High in the Hokage Tower, a crystal ball glowed, revealing the same scene. Danzo Shimura observed with a cold, calculating expression, while his companions shifted uneasily. Koharu expressed concern about Naruto's considerable power, while Hamura noted that he was reckless and untamed. Danzo remained silent, analyzing Naruto's every movement and contemplating the implications of his strength. Back on the field, Lee landed gracefully a few feet away, panting and steaming from the strain of the fifth gate, but his eyes burned with excitement. He praised Naruto's strength, comparing it to a radiant sun of youth, and declared that he had yet to show his full power. Naruto lowered his hand, a predatory grin spreading across his face, relishing the challenge. Lee took a deep breath, his posture shifting as the green aura around him intensified. He declared that he had dedicated his life to proving that hard work could overcome genius and opened the sixth gate of joy. A torrential explosion of emerald chakra erupted from him, powerful enough to kick up a hurricane of dust and leaves. The ground cracked beneath him, and the air vibrated with the force of his will, causing the Jonin sensei to flinch. Lee vanished and reappeared in front of Naruto, a green comet of pure force. He unleashed a relentless storm of punches and kicks from every conceivable angle. Each strike was powerful enough to shatter steel, and the air cracked with sonic booms as his fists and feet broke the sound barrier repeatedly. Yet, Naruto remained smiling, not moving from his spot. His arms became a blur, moving with impossible precision as he parried a kick aimed at his head, blocked a punch to his ribs, and swayed to let a devastating axe kick whistle past his ear. To the spectators, it appeared as though Naruto was overwhelmed, caught in the center of an emerald hurricane. However, Kakashi and Guy recognized the truth. Naruto was not merely defending, he was effortlessly neutralizing every one of Lee's attacks with minimal movement, standing firm like a stone in a raging river. Niji, observing with his Byakugan, struggled to keep up with Lee's immense speed, realizing that Naruto's movements were not faster but rather perfect. He was not reacting, he was already there. Lee, in the heat of his ultimate assault, felt a growing sense of disbelief, as if he were punching a mountain. Every blow he landed met with an unyielding defense. The boy in front of him wasn't just strong, he was on another plane of existence. With a final, desperate roar, Lee funneled all the power of the sixth gate into a single, decisive blow, a pile-driving kick aimed straight at Naruto's chest. This time, Naruto didn't block. He met the kick with his own. The two legs collided midair. For a moment, there was silence. No explosion. No shockwave. Just the sound of two forces meeting. Then, a sharp crack echoed across the training ground. Lee screamed in pain as he was sent flying backward, tumbling through the air, his right leg bent at an unnatural angle. He crashed to the ground in a heap, the green aura of the sixth gate flickering and fading as unconsciousness claimed him. Silence fell over the crowd, a stunned stillness enveloping the scene. Guy's voice broke the spell as he rushed across the field, kneeling beside his student. Sakura, her medical training kicking in despite her shock, hurried forward as well, urging Guy not to move Lee. Naruto stood in the same spot, unscathed. He slowly lowered his leg, his gaze fixed on Lee's unconscious form. The predatory grin was gone, replaced by a complex expression, a mixture of disappointment, a flicker of respect, and the quiet melancholy of a battle ended too soon. He understood, on a deep, instinctual level, the difference between the power of a human ninja and the spiritual beings of his past life. He hadn't expected Lee to possess the durability of a Shinigami captain or the resilience of an Arrancar. He had simply hoped the fight would last a little longer. Turning away from the frantic scene of Guy and Sakura attending to Lee, he walked back toward his discarded blade, the group of his former peers parting before him. Naruto picked up the massive Nozarashi, hefting it onto his shoulder without looking back at the group. He paused for a moment, his gaze directed towards the sky. He quietly acknowledged Lee's strength, stating that he was strong for a human. The words hung in the air, simple and factual. Coming from him, after what they had just witnessed, it was the highest form of praise imaginable. It was an acknowledgement of Lee's immense power, a validation of his years of hard work, and a chilling declaration of the unfathomable gap that now existed between them. Kakashi's eye widened slightly. It wasn't a taunt, it was an honest assessment from someone no longer judging by human standards. Naruto didn't wait for a response. He began to walk away, Yachiiro hopping back onto the blade. She cheerfully remarked about the fight, noting that Naruto had broken his new toy already. Naruto grunted, a faint smirk touching his lips as he acknowledged that Lee had put up a good fight. The thrill was gone, but a sliver of respect remained. For the new Naruto, that was a rare prize indeed. In the Hokage Tower, the crystal ball went dark. Danzo's fingers were steepled in front of his face, his expression thoughtful and more dangerous than ever. He whispered to the empty room about Naruto's control and durability, recognizing him as a weapon that had learned to aim itself. It concluded that the methods must be adjusted, as Naruto was far too valuable to be left to his own devices. The game had changed once again. In a realm devoid of sun or moon, under a sky of perpetual twilight, stood a fortress of bleached white stone. Inside its cavernous main hall, lit by the eerie glow of ethereal blue flames, a gathering of monsters was taking place. They were the ghosts of a war long past, the slain Espada of Hueco Mundo, given a second, profane life. At the head of a massive stone table sat Baragan Luzenbern, the skeletal king. He leaned back on his throne, his empty sockets surveying the room with an air of absolute, impatient authority. Sailaporo Granz, the mad scientist, meticulously cleaned a blood-flecked scalpel, a predatory smirk playing on his lips. Yami Largo sat slumped in a chair far too small for him, a fresh scar marring his jaw. Zamari Rurose, the zealot, stood perfectly still, his robes slightly singed at the edges. Aranyero Araruri remained a silent figure within his vessel, a faint crack visible on his porcelain mask. The signs of recent conflict were evident on all of them. Sailaporo announced that the latest skirmish was inconclusive. The blind one, Tozen, proved more adept at defensive maneuvers than anticipated, delaying their attempt to secure the soul well in the land of valleys. Yami slammed a gargantuan fist on the table, cracking the stone further, expressing his frustration over the delay and the interference of Jin Ikimar. Sailaporo sighed, pointing out that Yami's mindless rage was why he failed. They were not mindless hollows but the reincarnated souls of Gotii 13 captains, who possessed strategy. Zamari noted that they were adapting, particularly the one with white hair and twin blades, Yucatake, who fought as if unburdened by his past illness. Aranyero's multi-layered voice hissed, expressing frustration at their ongoing battles across the nations. They appeared wherever the Espada tried to feast or gather power, protecting the souls of this world as if they were their own. Baragan finally stirred, his voice raspy and commanding as he spoke of the self-appointed guardians of the new Soul Society. He expressed his weariness of the ongoing Shadow War, declaring that he did not tolerate stalemates. The empty sockets of his skull burned with a cold, black fire as he acknowledged the presence of Yamamoto, who had made his mark by incinerating one of Sailaporo's research outposts. Unohana was also present, training the boy who carried Kenpachi's soul. All their enemies had been reincarnated on this new battlefield. Sailaporo mused on the fascinating conundrum, a manic glint in his eyes. Their presence was a gift. This new world, with its chakra, served as a catalyst. Their resurrections had been their limit in the old world, but here, they had been allowed to evolve beyond what Aizen could have ever dreamed. A grotesque, second pair of wings sprouted from Sailaporo's back, pulsing with vibrant pink energy. They had ascended to their segunda etapa. Yami let out a low, guttural laugh, his form not just larger but denser, the number 0 glowing with malevolent energy on his shoulder. He felt that he did not need a second form. His rage was limitless and ever-growing. Barragan agreed, his skeletal hand clenching into a fist. A crown of black, decaying spiritual energy materialized above his head, symbolizing a power that had moved beyond mere release. He rose from his throne, his immense presence bending the very air around him. The time for pawns and foot soldiers was long past. Creations and exequias were tools of a weaker era. The time for subtlety was over, and the time for skirmishes had passed. His voice dropped to a low, commanding growl that resonated in their very souls. They would no longer react, they would act. They would divide the pathetic continent among themselves, each choosing one of the major villages to turn into their personal feasting ground. He looked at each of them, his gaze lingering as he issued his royal decree. They would force the reincarnated captains out of the shadows, not for a battle, but for an execution. They would show them the true meaning of evolution and the despair of facing a power they could no longer match. He raised a skeletal hand, the black crown of energy flaring. The shadow war was over, he declared, his voice echoing with the finality of a death sentence. Today, they would bring the full, ascended might of the Espada to the elemental nations. Today, their conquest would begin. The resurrected, evolved Arankars stood together, a silent, deadly accord passing between them. The secret battles were finished, and an open war of annihilation was about to be unleashed.